Very well.
Rolling, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call the January meeting of West Dakota Water Development District to order. And the first thing on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you please stand? Dan's going to give the invitation.
Thank you, Lord, for bringing us together and the opportunity to work together for the betterment of the county and the state. And please give us some insight. Let's have a good discussion. Amen.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the roll call of the members.
Okay, roll call January 12th, 2021. Cole?
Here.
Bierke?
Here.
Bristol?
Here.
McGregor? Here. Nautigal?
Here.
Rowe?
Here.
Matt?
Here.
Fleming? Here. Harris?
Here.
All present, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item is the approval of tonight's agenda.
Move to approve.
Moved by Dan and seconded by Tom for approval. Is there? Did you get that, Dan?
Got it.
Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item number 5, swearing in the newly elected directors. And there's 4 of us. So,
So should we take a break and do that and then reconvene? How do you?
no, it's just,
Okay, I just wondered if I should keep it rolling.
oh,
I'll keep it going.
Okay.
yeah, keep it rolling. So,
Okay,
what's the procedure?
Ms. Weaver has the,
Oh.
she's the notary.
Okay. Do we need to, remember, it's been so long.
There's 2 copies in case we miss one up.
Yeah, because Tina did it last year. What? Do I have to
Just
sign
do it right here.
Do I have to sign?
I didn't have one for you. I
Oh,
have
you don't, whatever on there.
just, yeah, Fleming, Rowe, and McGregor.
Oh, okay. Okay. Very good.
Toni? Yeah, that's my legal name. That's my alias.
Now we know.
Yeah. Oh, we did mess one up. Ms. Rowe, would you sign the other one, please? Let me instruct you.
Now I don't feel silly.
I almost did that too.
Oh, fill in the date too. Okay. Sorry. Not a problem. I just sold a big ass.
Good call, Dan. Okay, we're done. There's the last
Okay,
one.
that's good.
There's the one that was messed up, yeah. Oh, is it? Let's make sure. Yeah, she signed it there.
Okay, we have 3 new directors, Director Rowe, Director McGregor, and Director Fleming.
Congratulations.
Welcome to the board. You guys, you want to say anything about yourself? You're certainly welcome to. I'm fine. Yeah, we're good. Okay, we're good to go. So, moving right along.
Congratulations to you.
Yeah, thank you for coming and doing that. Appreciate that.
Wait a minute. I had to go to the podium and talk, and I did my hair. What the hell?
Well, the only bad thing is the photographer didn't show up.
You gotta deal
kidding.
with Gina though.
It helps, I did my hair too.
You should be up there. I did great.
It doesn't look like they want to. There's no pressure.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay, item number 6 is approval of the minutes from the December 8th meeting. Is
Move
there,
to approve.
moved by Dan Driscoll,
Chairman? I
second.
want to do that, I have 2 additions or 2 changes I'd like to make and 1 question about them.
On the agenda?
No, on the minute.
Oh, on the minutes, okay, go ahead.
First of all, on page 3, in the packet, 3 of 17, I didn't sign in on the sheet, but I was in attendance at the last meeting.
Okay. So noted.
I don't know if you need to have these changes made by motion or,
We'll make
We'll
a motion
incorporate it.
as amended, we'll amend it.
okay.
He was here, I remember. he
Yeah, I
was.
do, I remember, I talked to him.
The next change on page 7, on the substitute motion, 6, I think it would be appropriate after task 1 if we just added in there by parentheses, needs assessment.
Where is this now?
On page 7 of the packet.
Okay,
Third of the way down, substitute motion 6 by Klaus, seconded by Matt.
oh, okay,
If on task 1, I'd suggest after task 1, just in parentheses, we put in needs assessment, because there's really nothing in the minutes that tells us what task 1 is.
okay. Good suggestion. Go ahead.
So I wanted to comment on both of those. The first one, we went through this, I don't know if you remember, with Chuck Jasper, and he insisted that the attendance not include his name, so that's, I could put that in there, but that's why it wasn't in there, because I basically go by the sign-in, so that's, I just wanted to say.
Well, you know, when you sign in or not, if people are here, we know that they're here, I think. And then my third thing is I had 1 question on page 4. In the middle of the page, the paragraph starting Dr. Chapman showed a slide presentation. It says in their banner, will supply an administrative record compilation by the end of December. I just wondered if we got that.
She's gonna bring it by tomorrow,
Okay.
so no. On the motion, I guess I would be hesitant to recommend that we change the wording of the motion that was voted on.
You can just put it in parentheses, to put it up, I mean, there's nothing in this that says what task one is.
Yeah.
If you go back to the discussion part on that, where we listed out the various, project items.
Okay, I'll mark that
It,
on.
you know, it says needs assessment under technical evaluation, which I assume is task one. But it doesn't say task one. My recollection from our discussion is that is task one.
Yes,
So,
it
I
is.
mean, the minutes are just, you can't tell anything about it. You just use that task one. And leave it there.
Okay, I got a note here for that.
Anything else?
No, that's all I got. Thank you.
I'll comment that if there are people here who have not signed in yet, please do so, because that's been our protocol to go by the sign-in.
That's true.
And
I wasn't aware.
you were here and apparently you failed to sign in. We can forgive you. But those things aside, I'll amend my motion to, approve with these changes.
In a second, or is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, so the motion is to approve with the changes that were so noted. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Who was the second on that motion?
Tom.
Huh?
Motion carried. Item number 7 is conflict of interest disclosure. Is there any items on the agenda this evening that any member of the board would have a conflict of interest? If so, say something now. Seeing none, thank you. Item 8 is election of officers for this year. Yeah?
Well, two things. First, I'd like to recognize our outgoing slate of officers for the work they've done in the previous year. I think they've served us well, and recognizing that, I would make a motion that we reinstate the same slate of officers for the upcoming year, contingent on their willingness to serve another year.
And
Second?
seconded by Scott. So the officers this year, I'm the chairman, Tom is the vice chair, Ron is the treasurer, and Linda is the secretary from last year, for those that don't know. So we have a motion and a second. Is there, I guess we'll go ahead and vote on it. All in favor of that motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
That was quick.
That was very quick.
Is that so unusual?
That's very,
Of course it is.
It's a different wind blowing.
yeah. Well, item number 9, we have to designate an official newspaper for our minutes and so forth. And Rapid City Journal, the Hill City Prevailer, and the Wall Current are the ones that we currently have. Just for those that don't know, Wall is not within our district. They used to have a paper in New Underwood, and apparently the Wall Current bought them out, so we're staying with the Wall Current to cover that area of our district. Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the listed newspapers for the next year.
Motion by Ron, seconded by Linda. Discussion on the motion.
I have a question. I think, what does it cost us?
Did you hear that?
Yes, we have nothing until we do something. It's just a standard fee to do the legal notices.
We have to pay for the printing of the.
Yeah, the primary one is when the budget comes around, we have to publish the budget, and I would guess probably the Journal, we're talking a little over $100 for that item, and the others are probably more like $50. other stuff that might come up, then that would add a little bit.
That'd be roughly 1,000 a year.
Probably not that much, probably less than half of that.
Dan?
I guess to me, the cost isn't so much an issue, but I guess I would guess that it's a very small percentage of people that actually see these things in the paper. Those that are interested tend to go to the internet. I wonder if Mr. Mullally could inform us, what is our legal requirement? Are we required to have at least one newspaper, or?
I believe the state law doesn't say how many, it just says you need to designate a newspaper, so I would say one, yes.
We probably do not have the liberty yet of going totally internet.
No, this is a requirement.
I would certainly entertain the notion of cutting it back to one newspaper if other directors were so inclined for discussion.
Or for,
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
I can tell you, I've got the law here. It says, each year, each water development district board shall designate legal newspapers of general circulation published within the water development district as official newspapers of the district.
Yeah, I think the only one that,
So basically one or more.
one or more, yes. And we've had this discussion because we got pretty large area, and there are people from that Hill City area that might want to know what's going on. And then, of course, Rapid City, and then, like I said before, there was a newspaper in New Underwood, which is in our district, but then they were bought out, I guess, by the Wall. And so that's the reason we have three. If we want to change that, we certainly can do that. Tom?
What I would say is we should keep the three, because then we have total coverage of the district. So if you don't like the Journal but live in Hill City and like your local paper, you can still see the notices. It covers, it's a small fee that we pay. Granted, $1,000 is not really a small dollar amount, but it at least covers everyone. And I think we should stick to the three that we currently use.
Yours was not a motion.
No, I didn't make a motion. I just kind of
Okay.
threw it out for discussion.
And then
Okay.
I just made other comment.
So we do have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 10 is the treasurer's report. Dan?
Last year, the total revenue for 2020 was about $217,000. Total expenditures were about $131,000. And of course, for this year, we haven't spent too much. The projected revenue for that's actually an error there. That should say 2021. Wait. Having trouble reading this thing. Sorry. Yeah, let me look at the printout here. I may have made an error here. I think our projected revenue, I've got 211,000. I think it's actually a little more. I think it was more like
219 something.
Yeah, so I'll make a note to correct that. And savings and our assets, the savings and checking is about 103,000. We have 2 CDs for about 200,000 each, so that's a total of a little over 400,000. So the funds on hand are about 584,000. And like I said, there really haven't spent too much, so if there are no questions on that, I can go to the projects list.
Can you just tell me, what's our budget year? We work on a September to August, or we work on a calendar year?
Calendar year. So with the status of the projects, I guess the bottom line is our unpaid project obligations are about $267,000. And that includes the Green Valley, and so we're not really quite sure when that's gonna come into play, but to be safe, that's in there. And I put our budget in there just because this is the first meeting of the year, so we don't necessarily have to go through anything on that, but
You do have the $219,168 on that spreadsheet on page 13.
Yeah, the first page doesn't match
Okay.
up with that page.
yeah, so that's the correct number
Yeah.
for the tax revenue. There are no questions, that's all I have.
I just, have one on the revenue side, the tax levy we get, that's set by statute.
Yeah, it's,
I know I got my bill the other day, said I've got to pay $5.24.
yeah, it's, we have, I think it's 2.4 mils or whatever it is, that percentage.
Okay, so that's just automatically assessed by statute, you don't do anything?
Well, every year they have a cost of living index number that we can increase our revenues by that amount. That's the maximum amount we can.
Yeah, without, unless we do an opt-out, there's a CPI and growth.
CPI.
That's added to that, and then from that, they look at all the assessments and then decide what the levy's gonna be, and what levy's cut off with that amount.
Yeah, I think that first number that he had on that first spreadsheet that he was talking about, that 211,421 was the amount that we had the year for 2020. And so that increase from 211 to 219 is what the CPI was. And we voted to accept that.
It's a little bit interesting too, Scott, in that even though it increases through that CPI and process, because of growth of population, et cetera, in the district, like my levy went down this year. Went down like $1.
Mine went up 21 cents.
Lucky you.
Is there a motion for approval for the treasurer's report?
So moved.
So moved by Ron. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tom. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That brings us to item number 11, approve the 2021 annual meeting schedule. Tom Mack will handle that.
Okay, so on page 15 on your packet, it shows the projected meeting schedule. It follows the same procedure that we have in the last couple of years. It's the second Tuesday of January, March, May, July, August for the budget meeting, October and December, and then we always put the first meeting or this meeting of the next year on there just in case we all switch over. So that is the proposed meeting schedule, other than anything happening where the room isn't available or we have to shift something. This is the proposed meeting schedule. And I move to approve the schedule.
Moved by Tom, is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Wendy. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Tom, for doing that. Item number 12, overview of the West Dakota Water Development District stormwater inventory and erosion control at the South Dakota School of Mines. So Dan, just giving him a visit.
Okay, am I okay staying here instead of going to the podium.
Can you hear him from there, Dan, or does he
I
need?
believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Get
Yeah,
your-
you got a mic there.
get your slides up
I
there.
think Mr. Mullally's going to load just a couple of quick, short, few slides that I prepared. I guess the reason for this, our next two agenda items will be, basically a combination of final report, progress reports on these stormwater and inventory or erosion control projects. I was kind of an instigator behind, implementing these projects, and, I guess I envision both of them as what may be the front end of additional similar related work. And since we've got three new directors, basically the directors that have been seated before are aware of the background. But I thought it'd be, helpful to provide a little bit of context as to why we're doing this work. Why is it that this matters? So with that in mind, both of these were initiated during 2020. Kind of like I've related to already, both deal with subject matter that I personally am interested in pursuing as future program directions for West Dakota. And of course, whether or not that would develop, would be contingent on, future votes of the board. But I think there's value in basically future mitigation of stormwater and erosion control, within our water development district. Both of these were funded at just under $25,000, and I guess if the new directors are not aware, there's kind of a reason behind this. One of our, I forget if it's a bylaw, part of our structure is that any project that would exceed $25,000 expenditure requires 2 votes. $25,000 and less can be done with 1 vote. So since that was put in place, it had been raised from previously a limit of $5,000, but it's not unusual now that we're seeing projects that come in at $25,000 or under, clears the hurdle with 1 vote, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. So next slide, Dan. So for the stormwater inventory project, and then we'll be hearing from Jason Phillips here in a few minutes on, basically with his final report on this, but it's pretty well recognized that urban stormwater runoff is likely the most detrimental factor that we've got for water quality and related ecosystems, within Rapid Creek. Actually West Dakota has made a fair investment over previous years in studying some of these things. I kind of come up with the perspective that whatever studying you might do, maybe this is something that we could begin fixing. And actually this came up, one of the ideas that was submitted in a stakeholder meeting we'd had, in June a year and a half ago. A person had submitted an idea, well, why don't we do some more for improving, be it riparian conditions, et cetera, and it kind of made me think, well, maybe stormwater is somewhere where we could actually start begin making a bit of a fix. So, in my perspective, this inventory may be a first step in what may be some future stormwater mitigation projects. So, next slide. Dan, obviously, impervious area is kind of a major factor in the urban runoff scenario, and much of the city was built before. Currently, anything that gets built, there are basically stormwater, rules that apply. Basically, any impervious areas have to be mitigated to some extent to, in essence, minimize the downstream flooding. Some number of years ago, people started recognizing in these big cities as they built up into the basin, all of a sudden the people at the bottom of the basin were getting flooded, and someone said, well, maybe we need stormwater retention and things like that. you know, much of Rapid City was constructed, built before these things were in place. So, you know, I've kind of got a perspective. For those that are aware of the Trinity Eco Prayer Park down, you know, along St. Joe, right next to the Hardys. It was a project that West Dakota's been involved with, you know, trapping some of the urban stormwater runoff. You know, basically doing similar things in other locations. You know, you're not going to cure the problems in Rapid Creek overnight, but maybe slowly, one step at a time, we could begin to improve water quality in Rapid Creek, and you know, certainly to begin to help reducing some of the localized flooding could be another benefit. So next slide. The focus of the work, this project's with the School of Mines. The focus has really been on how could we identify, you know, where's the best potential for what I would think of as very small retrofits, really looking for, you know, where could we get the best bang for the buck? Where could we accomplish the most with the least expenditure? To a large extent, we've kind of excluded three main settings from what we've done as this first phase, and this has been kind of a pilot project, you know, and we'll hear more about that later. But one of the areas that we really kind of specifically exclude is what I think of as the downtown corridor, you know, and we get into downtown Rapid City, and it's pretty much all concrete, and most of the time to mitigate stormwater runoff, it helps if you've got some green areas where you know, can do a little bit of stormwater detention, or, you know, have ways to slow down, trap a little sediment, et cetera. You know, the concrete corridor is a pretty challenging setting, and it's probably largely beyond us. You know, the fixes tend to be very expensive. Another area I tend to think we really largely exclude would be the main residential areas. I mean, there's literally thousands of homes in Rapid City. Most have a roof, a driveway, sidewalk. You know, you've got this amount of impervious, and these are really too numerous to deal with on an individual basis. So for the purposes of the inventory, we didn't look at residential areas. And then you'll see that we targeted, you know, specifically, you know, 3 different drainage basins that we worked in, and we specifically avoided those that, you know, I kind of think of as newly developing areas. You know, when areas are developed now, stormwater mitigation typically is kind of built into the process. So anyhow, next slide, I'll show just a few quick examples, kind of what we're talking about. We don't have the best screen in town here. It's quite a ways away. It always wrinkles a little. It's hard to see, but use your imagination. On the left there's an arrow pointing to a curb cut. You can't see the curb, at least I can't. My eyes aren't that good. But part of the runoff drains to that curb cut. I've got a pointer here, but there's a little red dot. Okay, right there. There's a little green PVC pipe that drains out of. There's you know, water comes down this little bit of a gutter here, so it comes out there, and then this whole area is a little bit of a swale. It's a very small detention cell, and this is, it's actually located about 2 blocks from my house. But this was built, you know, ever since, you know, stormwater mitigation has been required, and it's easy to do things like this, you know, when you're building new. So we'll look at a few more slides. I'll show you a little more of the layout. The next slide here. So basically this main intersection is Minnesota and 5th. So the area we were looking at is right here. It's 1 block east on Wisconsin Street, and so we were looking right there. And so this is kind of a complex of couple of dental and medical type facilities where, you know, you can kind of see what, we'll see them here on a couple more photos, but there's kind of a connected swale along here and then a larger swale over here. It kind of mitigates, you know, pretty large impervious area there. And then next we'll look, this is a Black Hills Workshop facility. This is Winslow Drive, but you know, it was built, probably 40 years ago before stormwater mitigation was required. So the next slide that comes up, it's really just starting to look north from the other photograph. It's part of the same cell, and so here there's a spruce tree. There's a little berm. This actually connects. There's another, you know, swale or small cell to the north. Which next slide, Dan, will show that there. We're kind of looking south, and so you can see the swale feature. And there's actually I think there's got a little battery left. There's a culvert kind of tends to connect them. The next slide, well, instead of looking south, we're looking north, and you can see, you know, again, a little culvert here that connects the things. And the next slide then will be just one notch further north. You know, it's pretty visibly a swale. And then the next slide shows the north end of this newer complex. And, you know, like I say, when you're building new, this all comes pretty simple, and it works, you know, very, very effectively. So then the next slide shows this Black Hills Works facility that's more typical of older development. And you know, my eyes are good enough. I know what I'm looking at. This is a downspout, and there's a couple others along there, but you know, the rainwater comes off the roof and down onto the parking lot. There's a sidewalk here. You know, you could actually mitigate this by tearing out the sidewalk and putting a swale in there, but it's kind of spendy to do that. I don't know how much that accomplished. The next slide then is just backed up a few paces, and you're looking where it dumps out onto the street. And so there's a typical scenario. You know, the water in a lot of these older construction areas come straight off the roofs and onto the concrete and straight into the gutters and on down the, you know, to the stream, you know, kind of undeterred. So I think I'm down to about one more slide here. This is a little bit bigger picture. Right here is 5th and Minnesota again, so we look just north of there, and this is kind of the area to the south. This is the South Walmart. And then if you push the button again, Dan, it'll these red arrows basically show stormwater detention that exists within the area. So the big cell, you know, just southwest of Minnesota and 5th, and there's another one in there, another one down here. You know, there's all sorts of stormwater detention in this basin, which is part of the same basin we're working in. So one of the things Jason will tell us a little bit about is we tried to come up with a little bit of a ranking system on what are the factors that might matter when we prioritize how much benefit might we get from some sort of stormwater mitigation. And you know, one of these factors is that if you have a lot of, you know, detention facilities within a basin, you know, things tend to be already handled. And so, you know, that's the reason, like this particular basin, you know, was not one of our pilot basins. The pilot basins that we do have, the next one to the north, which is Meade Hawthorne, was one that we did include, and, you know, it was largely built before we had stormwater detention. So with that, one more slide is kind of the does anyone have questions slide before we turn it over to Jason. So anyone kind of wants to hear a little bit about why are we doing this or the big picture, you got a quick pause here.
Is that what that pit is on the Innovation Center they're building down by the post office? I noticed to the south of that building there's a big pit that's in that development. Is that
almost certainly, I haven't actually noticed it, but that's pretty typical, anything that gets built. If you've got an existing facility, like let's take here where we're sitting right now, you know, you got roof, parking lot, you know, there's no detention facilities. If they would need to go in with say a building permit, you know, to rebuild things, at that point in time, someone would say, well, we're going to have to look at the stormwater scenario. So the fact that, you know, they've got new construction going on there, that's probably required, and that's probably what you're looking at.
I would hope the School of Mines would be doing that.
You bet, Wendy. Go ahead.
Can you dumb that down just a little bit for me? Why we would be interested in that? And I'm just asking because I'm not sure.
Well, I guess in my opinion, so what is it that West Dakota is supposed to do? We're supposed to promote the wise and efficient, effective use and management of our water and water resources. And
Sure.
to me, Rapid Creek is very much of a resource. That resource, the urban stormwater runoff is a very large detriment. If you go out and look at a rainstorm someday, a good way to look at it is, you know, gets to raining good, go up to Canyon Lake, and above Canyon Lake, and Rapid Creek runs clear, and below Canyon Lake it usually runs pretty clear, and as you go on down, it starts getting siltier as you go. About the time you get to the Bacon Park areas, where you really start transitioning from, you know, more residential to more concrete, and from there on down, there's just a lot of sediment coming in, and you know, I mean, it's obvious that, you know, mitigation of stormwater runoff has become important to communities, to EPA, and to me, there's only so much you could do, but there are a lot of places that we could really help slow the stormwater flow and you know, reduce the sediment load to Rapid Creek, and you know, you're not. There's many decades worth of work that you know, would need to be done, many millions upon millions of dollars to return it to a pristine condition. It'll never happen, but you know, to me, it'd be a good use of our dollars to, you know, begin to chip away at it. And I think a bigger picture is, to what extent might West Dakota help to develop a culture of how do we as a community, you know, improve our resources through things like stormwater mitigation.
You know, one thing the city of Rapid City is that they focus more on the big picture. You know, what Dan was talking about are smaller, less costly projects that would help improve, you know, dropping sediment out up in the basin rather than getting down to Rapid Creek. But the city pretty much is more focused on the bigger picture, the larger projects, and they have the financial resources to do that. So we would just be doing a partnership with them on a much smaller scale, because we don't have that much money. And some of these places, I was out in the field with Jason and Dan. We were over at South Middle School, big area. They got a lot of open area there, and there's a drainage that goes down through there that has a drop inlet into a culvert that moves the stormwater out of there. And it's just a natural swale, and by putting in a riser on that structure and hold the stormwater back and let that silt settle out, for example, before it overflows and goes to Rapid Creek, is one example of something that could really help improve the water quality in Rapid Creek.
So at the end of the day, it's just all about cleaner water.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
You know, you weren't on the board, but our board has spent our monies on looking at the water quality through Rapid Creek. We've had some studies that have been done by the School of Mines, and there's definitely a deterioration of water quality, as Dan said, as the water flows through Rapid City. And if we can help in a small way, I think that's part of our mission statement.
Sure. Thanks, Dan.
If I could add to that, So it is about clean water, but it's not all about clean water, right? Water is one component of this biodiversity that we've lost when we pave over everything. And we've taken nature and we've paved over it, and we've lost this element of biodiversity and this connection with nature. And so when we look at sustainable stormwater management, you start adding this biodiversity back and creating habitat for pollinators and creating green spaces for people. So you start adding these social and these other components to it, and so it becomes a bigger perspective than just, protecting our water resources. And so it's all really connected. So that to me, that's the biggest important thing, is putting it all together and having it be one holistic approach.
Jason, would you identify yourself for the record?
Sorry, my name is Jason Phillips. I'm with the South Dakota School of Mines.
We all know you, but
PhD student. So Happy New Year. Congratulations to the new members. Welcome.
Happy New Year.
So are we moving along
So
then?
are we moving on to?
I think there's some more questions.
Not sure where we're at, okay.
I just got a question. Is the city in its development and planning operations pretty cognizant of this? I mean,
Oh,
do they
yes.
regularly take this into account in the project
Yeah.
approvals and the development of the?
How many stormwater drainage basins do we have in Rapid
27.
City? There's 27 different assigned drainage basins, and they're doing master planning on all of those right now, and it's an ongoing thing as the city develops. It's been going on for years, but they're very much cognizant of the same issue. They want the same thing we want.
I guess if I'd, expand on that just a bit, if, there are many legal requirements. So with the construction, if you get to looking around at new construction, a lot of times you'll see what are called wattles. So these are round straw filled to like a long sock, so, it's for sediment control. You're supposed to go around the perimeter. I mean, there are lots of things like that that are part of the best management practices for new construction. I mean, these are legal requirements, and, if contractors aren't following them, then they've got enforcers that are supposed to go out and try to force them into compliance, and that's kind of one whole end of it. The city has got a focused stormwater management program, and they've been in sync with us on this project. They help to support it by helping provide GIS coverages and things like that. They have done a lot of things in recent years that are kind of visible. If you go just north of the old Albertsons store, the intersection of I-190 in Omaha, the northeast corner of that, there's a large detention cell in there. It's west of where those tennis courts were. And so that is very efficient. The stormwater comes out of part of this concrete corridor and it dumps in there, and it's retained there. It's slowed, and if, the wife and I ride our bicycles past there oftentimes, and when you get a good flow, it comes up and flows over the sidewalk. Usually there's nobody riding then, but, always left behind is this murky water, and it's catching the sediment. So there's a lot of things that are going on, over time to help improve things. And
Can you give me a kind of a ballpark what the deterioration in water quality in Rapid Creek is from, say, the fish hatchery to what do they call it now, Family Fair down on Campbell, by the time you get through that stretch there of the creek?
You want to talk on that, Gail?
I can maybe give a quick overview. So
He studied it.
I'm Galen Hogeshaw with USGS. I can unmask myself for the record so everybody can see me. We've collected some water quality samples and done various, kind of sampling efforts, some involving West Dakota a couple of years ago with the bacteria study where we sampled at various points. So, yeah, as you would suspect, the water quality gets worse as you get farther downstream. And, from a bacteria standpoint, from Canyon Lake, you've got very low bacteria, so kind of below any kind of threshold that you'd be concerned with for swimming or fishing and things like that. But by the time you get down below the lower parts of the city, it's occasionally not meeting its standards. So it's got standards for E. coli of several hundred they call them most probable numbers. So it doesn't always meet that criteria by the time it gets to the lower parts of the city.
Is this a county, like ordinances and everything for new building, that they're actually doing pretty good with this? And what about like Fox Elder? Or do they mitigate at all out there? Or is it just Rapid City? You know, I mean, is it a county thing or is it a city thing?
Do you want me to field that, Dan?
Yeah, well, go ahead.
The county has stormwater ordinance also for basically impervious areas and new construction. You know, if you're a farmer out there in the county, I'm not really aware of any stormwater ordinances that apply. But in the urban part of Rapid City, I mean, the county has been, you know, in step with us on this inventory project also. You know, basically as you transition from the Rapid City, you know, city limits into Rapid Valley, you know, if you transition to, you know, the county planning and zoning department is the one that is in essence in charge of the stormwater, you know, rules, management and regulation. So.
And there is MS4 permitting for like communities like ours that separate storm sewer systems. They're not combined. So then the city has a boundary and they have to meet EPA criteria within that MS4 boundary for urban runoff. So then once you're outside that boundary, then, you know, your regulations and meeting those regulations are not as stringent or possibly not even existent outside of those boundaries. So Box Elder's a smaller population and would have, you know, less stringent criteria than Rapid City, I would think, but I'm not aware of that. But
So, thank you for that. My question would be, why isn't Rapid City funding this project?
Why aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, just what I was saying, you know, they have a limited amount of money that they get every year. They do have a drainage program, and then when there's a major street reconstruction, utility reconstruction, then they look at the stormwater component of that too, as far as the design. But I mean, there's millions of dollars that it would take to, you know, do everything. So they get so many dollars a year. So they kind of handle the larger projects, like when they're redoing the street, like Omaha Street. So what we've been talking about is doing these very small, very much less costly projects that Dan was describing. One of the things I was going to say too is we were talking about the water quality is the South Dakota Department of Natural Resources also samples the streams in South Dakota and here in our district. So they have a record too of water quality that they keep and keep an eye on what's going on.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Before I retired, I worked for the DENR, and one of my jobs was to do water quality monitoring and sampling. And of course, a lot of my sites were on Rapid Creek. And so just in a general way, my site above Canyon Lake, the water was usually about 1.5 feet deep. If we threw a quarter in, I would see it on the bottom. As I moved downstream through town, my last site would be by the family fair. When I got to there, usually the water was pretty turbid. You couldn't see the bottom, and I was typically standing in at least 6 inches of mud, where above stream, you did not have that sediment. So, you know, everything that Rapid City is contributing through the impervious areas is there. I mean, it's obviously a detriment to Rapid Creek as it moves through town. And then as it continues on, then some of the agricultural practices also contribute to suspended solids and sediment in the water.
Yeah. And specifically as to why doesn't Rapid City fund it, you know, what we're really doing, this is an inventory where are the sites where we might go out and partner with somebody, you know, a church, Black Hills Workshop, et cetera. There are no non-compliance issues. You know, that they are in compliance. These regulations were not in place when they built these facilities. If they were building them now, they would be required to build them differently. But what we're looking at is, could we go out there in the future and work with these entities voluntarily, you know, maybe do a cost share and say, hey, could there be an opportunity to slow the stormwater and improve the, you know, our runoff conditions? So that's why the city has no reason to do a study like this.
I have another question, but maybe you're gonna cover it. Is there, a specific, limit on from where, from where at Rapid Creek out, like a specific space,
You talking like
area
a
that you're looking
riparian?
at? Or, because you were talking about over, by where you live.
You know, I would say,
Do you know
yeah,
what I would say?
we targeted 3 specific stormwater basins out of a total of 27 that are in the area, and maybe we're at the point if Jason showed us what he's done, and then we'd have some more questions.
Right, okay.
I think a lot of this would get answered by what Jason would cover.
I do want to say though, what we do here directly impacts people downstream, probably more so than how we're impacted, you know. And so Ken, the guy that runs the Eco Prayer Park, he's on the Pennington County Conservation District Board, and there's constantly people talking about the bank erosion that they're getting from the increased amount of volume of water that's coming downstream from Rapid City due to all of our impervious surfaces. So it is a county-wide thing, you know, and it's that upstream-downstream connection is very important.
And Jason, are you still on that committee?
No, Ken Steichen sits on that.
Ken used to be on this board when I first came on. He was on this board, and he's over there now. But that Eco Park thing, he kind of championed that project way back when.
Not bad for a Spanish teacher.
Real good for a Spanish teacher. Yeah, he's done a good job with that. And we just funded, you know, we just gave him, what, 25,000 more?
You got my slides?
Okay, was it this one?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we're on item 13.
Then are you able to make it go full screen? Maybe see it a little bit better?
I'd rather not because it
He's
blocks
on
up my
this one. He's gonna have to
recording
talk about this
process.
one. But he wanted Jason to talk and then go back to that.
So Dan, thanks for introducing me and the project and stuff. He did a great job giving the background and everything on the project, so I'm gonna just
No, that's not it.
jump straight to the nuts and bolts of it and talk about how we did it and the results. Yeah, this is it. So yeah, we're going to talk about the methods, the drainage basins that we selected, the results, and then the future recommendations. So first thing we did was developed a geodatabase using GIS, and then a set of inventory parameters and fields that Dan kind of talked about a little bit. The main fields that we developed, I'm not going to go into depth on the process of ranking each one of these. We'd be here quite a while. But we looked at the ownership rank. Is it private, publicly owned? Is it a nonprofit? And then we ranked them 1 to 5, private being the lowest, nonprofits being the highest. And the reason for that is nonprofits are 501c3s, and they're eligible to apply for grants. And there's lots of grants out there that could help fund these green infrastructure projects for on-site stormwater management. So they received the highest rank in that field. We took the basins, split them up into 5 regions, down gradient to up gradient. And the whole idea is the water up gradient would have a higher impact on everybody down gradient versus the site right here that's going to flow right into Rapid Creek. Water quality issue-wise, this site would still have impacts, but on the big picture of it, We ranked them from 1 down gradient would be the lowest, 5 up gradient being the highest. All of these categories were ranked 1 to 5 for each one of them. The percent impervious, that's the amount of impervious land cover that's on a site. You know, is it 80%, 80 to 100 was received 5, 0 to 20 received 1. You know, areas that don't have a lot of impervious don't really need a whole lot of stormwater management. The directly connected impervious surfaces is a big one. And Dan alluded to it, the roof draining to the driveway, draining to the curb and gutter, draining to the storm sewer, going directly into Rapid Creek is directly connected impervious surfaces. And that runoff doesn't ever come into contact with the soil, which helps it slow down, spread out, and infiltrate back into the ground. So we see those large increases of volumes and that flush of pollutants into the receiving waters. The down gradient stormwater management, that's the, you know, is there a detention pond down gradient of the site? If it's good stormwater management and it's sufficient, then that received a 1. If there was nothing, it got a 5. You know, if there's a site that's going right into a detention pond, we don't really need to worry about it as much as a site that's flowing down the street. We're at available green spaces. So within a lot, you got impervious surfaces, and if it's draining down, if all your green spaces are at the top of that site and the water's draining away from it, it doesn't do us a whole lot of good. So we ranked it on that benefit of, you know, is there some feasible areas where we can implement a stormwater project? The benefit to cost ratio is pretty self-explanatory. If there is high benefits with low costs, it received a high score. If there is high cost, low benefits, it received a score of 1. The pavement conditions, we looked, you know, if there's good pavement conditions, they just redid their parking lot. The chances of them wanting to be able to do a stormwater project and tear that pavement up to reroute the grading to go into a detention facility is not very feasible. Versus if there's a parking lot that needs to be replaced, there's some opportunity in there that we could come in and partner with them and install a stormwater project on that site. The opportunistic factor is, you know, basically based on any kind of opportunity. If there's the street outside of that site is in need of repair and the infrastructure is in need of repair, and the city's going to come in and do a project, and the site needs some stormwater management, well, there's an opportunity where the city and the site could partner up and we could have a more feasible opportunity of implementing stormwater at that site. So that received a rank. The on-site stormwater management, if the site already had on-site stormwater management, we don't need to go and do any more on-site stormwater management, so it received a 1. If there was no on-site management, it received a 5. So then there was the potential pollinator corridor, and that's looking at the ecosystem services. So we got all this impervious surfaces with no habitat for the insect pollinators and to cover that ground. And so if we could break that up and have green spaces where there's little try to connect these larger green spaces and have these travel corridors, then we were creating this ecosystem service and these pollinator corridors. The initial rank category it's subjective. It was me looking at a site and being like, yeah, this is, has some potential. We could, I give it a 3. No, this site's not going to work. It's all impervious. It's going to cost a lot of money to do something. I'd give it a 1. This site would, there's a lot of impervious surfaces, but there's an area where we could do something. I would give it a 5. So then we would tally all those up and get an overall collected rank once we would inventory those projects. So I used ArcGIS Pro, delineated all these points, ranked them, and then I went out into the field and then verified them all to, is it really 40 to 60% directly connected? And I would go and look at all these ranks to verify I was ranking them appropriately. Next idea. So these were the initial 5 basins when we had the meeting with the Pennington County and the city of Rapid City. And some of the school mine staff and Dan. These were the 5 basins that we decided on. The South Canyon Basin on the left, Haynes Avenue up there on the top, Knollwood. We are in Knollwood right now, if anybody didn't know that. Meade Hawthorne Drainage Basin and the Racetrack Basin out in Rapid Valley. The 3 that we did were the Meade Hawthorne, the Knollwood, and the Racetrack Basin. Next
And
slide.
if I could help clarify here, Jason, the way the proposal was written was that the intention, we didn't know how long this would take, how far we would get, so we had written it up such that, we would propose to work in at least 3 basins, and up to 5, we figured would be the upper end of what we could do. And so we, talked with the city and the county to prioritize, where are the best, representative basins. And these were the 5 that were decided on, and we ended up working then in 3 of them is what you managed to complete, correct?
Yeah, and the city gave me all the data for these 5 basins. So, if we were to get to that 4th basin, and then we'd have to go back and get all the data. So they gave me all their GIS data up front, all their storm sewer infrastructure, the detention ponds, the channels. So when I was mapping this out, I was looking at GIS, and I could see where all the outlets were, where the storm sewers are going, what areas are going to what pond, what areas are going to no stormwater management, straight to Rapid Creek. And so I wasn't just flying around blindly ranking these sites. I got a pretty well grasp on the drainage in Rapid City, and I spent a lot of time in the stormwater. But I was able to look with their data and really get an idea of what was going on. So the results, we ended up creating inventorying 360 sites throughout the 3 basins. So there was 115 in the Meade Hawthorne, 51 sites at the Racetrack Basin, and 194 within the Knollwood Basin that we inventoried. And then that table there just kind of shows the distribution of how many sites in each basin, what rank they got. So the Meade Hawthorne had 36 basins that got a score of 4 or 5, which means it's a feasible opportunity that we could look further into to this could be potentially be a good spot to do some stormwater management on site. The Racetrack only had 6. It didn't receive any scores of a 5. Big part of that is it's not fully developed. It's a newer basin. A lot of the stuff that was developed out there has got stormwater management on site, and they have a pretty good handle on it. Doesn't mean that there's no issues out there and that there's not a need for stormwater management out there. But when comparing them to our criteria, it had lower scores in that basin. The Knollwood had 28 basins and 4 and 5 is kind of what I set that threshold on of looking at. These could be feasible areas. Next.
So, Jason, can I ask a
Yep.
question?
Sure.
Okay, this is great this is awesome information. A lot of stuff I don't quite understand, but I guess in my little pea-sized brain, lots of work's been done already. It sounds great. I guess my question is, what happens with all of this? What's the plan at the end of the day and who's going to use this, and what are they going to do with this?
So for the board, for the overall initial plan of this is to be able to get that lowest hanging fruit. Instead of starting all right, where can we go do a project? So this whole inventory project is going within the basins and really ranking these sites on, where could a feasible area be to where we could go and implement projects. And then the next phase, this is just the first step of it. Then it's going and doing a feasibility study, and I'll get into that in the future recommendations. But does this site really, so it ranks a 5, but is it really better than this site that ranks a 4? Well, what if this site's a 3 and they want to do a stormwater project? So we got to be able to take this data and then go and see what can we do with it and where can we really go start implementing these projects.
Okay, and that makes sense. So the initial plans is just to see where the areas are that make sense. And so what it sounds like is it's a possibility that somebody will be back asking for more money for where. Yeah. And so that makes sense to break it down into chunks, and I respect that. So, go ahead, Dan, I'm sorry.
No, I was just trying to get in the queue here.
And there's a lot of other benefits that's going to come out of the use from this data. I had a hard time not looking and analyzing this data in other ways that we weren't really, the board was trying to, we're trying to find out where's this lowest hanging fruit. And I'm looking at it like, oh, well, where do we really need stormwater management? Mm-hmm. And I'll show you, when I get to the points, I'll show you the next slide, and you'll be able to get a better understanding with this next slide.
Question about your ranking, is it the 4 or 5s that are the more critical, or the 1 and 2?
So the 4s and 5s present a better opportunity. They're more feasible. There's more potential in those sites to be able to implement a project. Will you go to the next slide, please?
Okay.
Because then, that doesn't mean that those are necessarily the sites that need stormwater management. They're just the sites that are the most feasible to possibly do some stormwater management on that site. So this is the Meade Hawthorne Basin with all the points that we've ranked, all the sites that we inventoried. And so they're color-coded to show their rankings. So all the green ones are the ones that scored a 5. So those are the sites that present the best opportunity to be able to do a stormwater project. All the sites that are red received a score of 1. Those sites don't present the best opportunity. That doesn't mean that they're not the sites that need it. And there's a lot of sites. That whole entire corridor on Mount Rushmore Road, most of them are ranked 3. There's a couple 2s in there. But those are the areas that really need the stormwater management. We got Safeway out there that is a whole entire block, and it's all concrete and rooftop. When it rains, all that water goes straight down creek and floods out Thomas.
It's true.
And so this ranking process it's not telling us where, at least this image right here doesn't tell us where the most need for the stormwater management is. But with that data that's collected, I could sort this data and reclassify it based on the sites that don't have any stormwater management. And these dots will change different colors, and then we can start looking at different things with this data other than finding where's the lowest hanging fruit.
So my issue with this is just Rapid City.
Yes.
Okay. Taxpayer money is all of Pennington County. And so what is Safeway's responsibility for building there and taking care of what they've got going on there? I mean, does that make sense? I guess I don't understand why we would, I think it is worthy of looking into, but this is just a chunk here, and then we're looking at more money down the road. This is just Rapid City, and we're spending Pennington County taxpayer money, which includes way more than Rapid.
So again, though, what we do here directly impacts it more than impacts the farmer down at Farmington, whose banks are eroding and their properties getting eroded because of the increased volume of water coming from places like Safeway and all these places that have built, and they're just able to pave everything, and they don't have any stormwater management. So now the city's trying to figure out, well, how do we manage all this stormwater? And it's not an easy task.
And that's the city's responsibility.
But it benefits the people downstream. Absolutely does. More than it'll benefit us, because that water's leaving us. So
But I
really,
don't
the
know
people
how
that's-
Rapid City
that's
doesn't
being
have a
impacted.
responsibility to help pay for this. So
Well, they're paying for it. They're spending a lot of money every year on.
I don't mean to be disrespectful.
No,
Jason.
no, this is
I'm
great.
just,
The city has a drainage program that they collect money from taxpayers, but they don't generate enough money. And then the other thing is they have to maintain these facilities too. So a certain portion of that fee, that drainage fee, goes for maintenance. Quite a bit of it actually, because you can't build something and just leave it there. I mean, it takes maintenance. It takes a lot of maintenance to keep this stuff up. So, that's. Go ahead.
Well,
The gentleman out there.
is your question, this part of your question this benefits primarily the Rapid Creek corridor as opposed to the whole county. And should,
It's part of it, Dan.
so,
It's the,
so, I mean, it's a very rare project we have where you could say, this has a direct benefit to the entire county. One of the things we recently funded, the town of Keystone, asked for assistance
sure.
on basically a warning mechanism for the water system, which does not benefit the whole county, but, there was,
You're right.
I don't recall that it was unanimous, but, it passed.
I voted for it, yep.
It's, if we said we're gonna restrict ourselves to things that benefit only every resident within the county, we wouldn't fund very many things.
Yeah,
And
this-
I respect that,
this
but
is-
also you're talking about Rapid City versus Keystone, which Rapid City has quite a bit more money than a place like Keystone would have. So, I respect what you're saying, Dan, but that's my opinion too.
The gentleman way in the back there, he had his hand up. Do you have a question?
Hi, I'm Dr. Lebo from School of Mines. I'm the PI on this project, Jason's advisor. This specific project's a tool. This was tool development. So the tool was developed for 3 basins. It can be taken anywhere in the county to any incorporated or unincorporated area and applied. So Jason's showing is a tool. That tool can then be applied in Meade County. It can be applied anywhere. So it has broader applications than just the 3 basins he's showing.
With the cost that's being presented tonight.
The cost that was approved previously was to develop the tool and to validate it on 3 basins.
Got it. Thank you.
I'll take off my mask so you can actually hear me.
Okay.
Peggy Sieverding. One of the things we have to bear in mind is that information is power. And you really, in order to develop good policy, you need good information. The city does the best they can with the rules that they have. If they were to say, develop new rules to implement stormwater control, well, where do you start? What would be a fair rule? What would be a rule that would help solve the problem? And that's not information that's necessarily readily available to policymakers. So doing studies like this can help provide the information to make effective policy and effective rulemaking. So that in the future we can do things differently potentially and do it in such a way that it's fair and in such a way that it can help solve the problem.
Sure. I don't disagree with that. As long as it pertains to everybody that we provide support to, which right now we're just talking about Rapid City. But I understand what you're saying. Thank you.
So we got all these points that we've ranked. The green and the yellow are going to be some of the higher priority areas. That yellow box represents the area. So you see those little light blue channels? Those represent a channel. There's very little stormwater management from that area where all that impervious surface is, and then it goes to the neighborhood, and then those blue lines leaving that yellow box goes down to Rapid Creek that's at the very far right end corner where the red line ends. That's the end of the basin, and that's where Rapid Creek is. So there's very little stormwater management that happens through there. And the area right at that right side border is a problem area. There's been a lot of significant flooding, people's homes being flooded, and a lot of issues that happen right in that area. So that's kind of the high priority area that I've delineated within this basin. It doesn't mean that this is the only area that really needs to be worked on, and this is kind of just a stepping stone of if you're going to really start looking at places, then you can kind of start here to really start looking for feasibility. The other little priority area, the next slide will show a picture of this area. So right here, this is a really good example of directly connected impervious surfaces. This site's the Polaris dealership that's across from Arctic Ice on St. Pat as you're heading out towards the Rapid Valley. So their whole entire parking lot kind of drains to the middle, drains out this concrete pan, hits the curb and gutter, goes south, drops into some inlets that drop into a little tributary channel, and it flows for about 50 yards. It's into Rapid Creek. So this is directly connected. This site is going directly from their site off of it to Rapid Creek with no interference. So this would be an area where it wouldn't take much to pull this concrete pad up and dig a swell in here to let some of that first flush. So a big thing with water quality is the first half inch of rain. So after you have a dry period, and it didn't rain when I was doing this, they're like out there washing their inventory or something. All this water that's draining down through there is from them like washing their four-wheelers and boats or whatever they got out there, because there was no rain that whole week I was out in the field. So get rid of that concrete. You could do a little, even if it's grass, it'd be a filter strip. But that first flush of water is what transports all the sediments that build up over time and the pollutants that are on the surfaces. So handling that first flush is important for the water quality. So this would be an area where for low cost, you'd have pretty high benefits. Next slide, please. So this just kind of zooms up into that priority area that was on that slide, that yellow box. And it shows the big corridor of all the impervious surfaces. You can see a green dot right there kind of in the bottom, towards that bottom area. That site right there, there's a big, not a big, but a decent size square of open green area. So to implement a stormwater project there would cost less versus trying to go, say, over to the Safeway and talk them into tearing up part of their parking lot and putting in a stormwater treatment facility. So that received a higher rate. If you go all the way over to the very far right, the big field with the white roof, that's South Middle School. That's one of the areas that we thought would be a good place to implement a pilot level project. And the big thing is educating people, right? These little projects, like Dan said, it's not going to solve the problem right away. But people don't know it. The water is in the storm sewers and it's gone, and it's out of mind, out of sight. And so the ways that they did it before, it was get that water as far away as fast as possible. Now it's slow it down, spread it out, and let it soak in. So the next slide will show you some of the pictures. So the South Middle School pictures are right there on the bottom. You got all that parking lot, the rooftop, everything kind of drains out to there, and then it comes out of the little storm sewer and then through the parking lot. You can see the velocity coming out of there. They can't get anything to grow, and it's just kind of that muddy mess there. So, this would be a potential area where you could implement a project for low cost and have a decent amount of benefits. And then what if you got the kids involved? What if they're out there helping build a rain garden and learning about stormwater and protecting our water resources? So now you've taken water and turned it into this sustainable subject where you got social, environmental, and economic all coming together into one ball. So there's a church over here on that red line. This is what you were talking about earlier, I think, weren't you?
No, I was talking about in the middle school property where that drop inlet was.
So all that runoff from the church and the parking lot is coming down around to where my car is parked, and then it kind of comes off of there, and there's a little mini detention pond with a grate on the bottom there. So this is good. This is better than it just going right into the concrete channel that's there. So it disrupts that impervious surfaces and gives the water place to hold and kind of delay that timing of getting in there. But we could build a little standpipe in there and plant it with plants that soak up the water and create this habitat for pollinators. And it's not broke, it's working, it's fine. But we can enhance it and improve it and make it better for not a whole lot of money compared to other sites. Next slide. So the bottom picture is the picture of that vacant lot where the green dot is that got a 5. All that water, a lot of it kind of goes in there. So it's not like it's not serving a purpose, but we could create a little rain garden in there, have a nice little area where people, all those businesses from right there, get them involved, have them share some of the costs, create a little area where they could go have lunch there and get away from work and connect with nature while that place is serving as a stormwater facility. So that's the whole idea, is not just have it be managing stormwater, but have it be doing other things, serving other purposes, and then it becomes sustainable. So the top picture shows another church. All that water right now hits a curb, comes through the sidewalk, hits the street, and is gone. We'll get rid of that curb, dig a little swell in there, and I like to call them prayer gardens instead of rain gardens for churches, a little prayer garden. And so churches are 501c3s, so they're more likely to be able to get grants that could help pay for that. So West Dakota, we're not coming and trying to get money and expecting West Dakota to pay for all this, and start trying to go after other grant money and implementing some of these projects.
Jason, do you have a long-term plan for that kind of thing?
Well, I've been in school for 10 years and I wasn't planning on it,
No, I get it. But I mean, I think it's great. Lots of great ideas, beautiful ideas. So we're talking about this stuff. But is there a penciled out draft of who might be interested in this kind of thing? The churches, the schools, the businesses, to contribute and benefit from the areas that you're talking about?
not right now.
Okay.
But that's the future work that's gonna come out of this. So this is kind of the first step that leads to that,
Okay.
you know?
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So this shows the next two basins. The Knollwoods on the left and the racetrack is on the right. You can see there's far less points on the racetrack, but you can see it's way less developed. And it's mostly residential, and we didn't do any kind of inventorying in the residential areas. You know, so the amount of big commercial and big sites were limited in the racetrack versus the Knollwood is full. It's highly impervious, and there's lots of things going on there. And the city's got quite a bit of stormwater management in that basin. So same thing, those two little yellow boxes are kind of priority areas that, you know, just going through the whole inventory process, that I found densities of where there was sites that had higher rankings. Next slide. So I'll speed it up. It's just more pictures. It shows, so that top picture up there shows a little grass swell. Parking lot drains into it. The curbs are there. All that sediment is built up over time, and it's gotten higher, so the water's not really getting in there anymore. So we could go in there and for a little money get that thing functioning again. And so, and this is the issue where the city has with it, is that the city has nothing to do, they don't come and maintain a person's site. And so they're doing the big picture, the big level projects, where it's up to us, individual homeowners, property owners, to be responsible and do the right thing and start implementing these changes. Down here is just,
I'm sorry.
no, you're good. We can move on. It's just more pictures of possible areas and sites. That area over there, that's Taco Bell over on East North. Right now with the drive-through, the water comes through a little curb cut, runs across the grass, dumps out to a little curb cut. So for very little money, the path is there. I'm not going to say little money, but for lower costs and higher benefits, you could have a rain garden there to help capture some of that runoff. It would fill up and then just keep running the way that it's going. You're not installing new infrastructure. You don't have the cost of removing pavement. You got the cost of implementing a rain garden. Next slide. So here we are, future recommendations. Implement another phase of this project to refine the inventory fields and the database, and to really make sure, are we ranking these right? Is this going to be feasible? Is this going to work in other areas? So this is just the pilot level project to really hash all this stuff out and hone it in and make sure you got a viable tool that you can take to other communities and apply it and have them be able to use it. Perform feasibility studies on some of these sites that have that higher potential, and see, is it feasible? What is the feasibility on implementing some of these projects? And future development and support of the tool for prioritizing stormwater management in Rapid City and surrounding communities. So I'll open it up to more questions. Thank you for all the questions. This has been great. It's way better presenting when it's a conversation-based talk instead of just talking.
Ron's got a question.
Yeah, thanks. I don't think I had this fully in my head yet, but I think that the effort that you went through on the 3 basins that you did examine probably gave some good insights into how to develop, a prioritization kind of a tool mechanism, like the gentleman said earlier. This was sort of one of the main focuses. From my perspective, the 3 basins you looked at, though, are in many ways quite similar, so they didn't quite get to the variety that was maybe some of the intent. They're all east of the hogback. They all have maybe soil types that are grading away into some of those black shales, a lot of older development, quite a bit of impervious material in there. You specifically stayed away from some of the higher gradient, maybe residential, some of the western areas, even though you had one basin there. And so I have a little bit of a concern of how this tool would work, or how it might work in some of those other kinds of basins, and as you look at all those dots on there, it's obvious there's all kinds of problems. Maybe we need to figure out how to get some of this kind of information in the hands of people, so that they can begin to implement some of this stuff, maybe on their own. There obviously has to be some pilot stuff, but there's too much out there for any entity to cover. It's going to have to be where people start to recognize more of what they do has an impact, and they can do little things, so. And maybe we need to work on the upstream, working down, kind of approach in some ways, versus trying to whack away at some of these things where we've already got huge problems and the water's pretty dark by then. Maybe work upstream a little bit more as well, in terms of some of our efforts. I was kind of disappointed not to see some variety in my mind on the basins, where you had the South Canyon Basin is kind of what I looked at as maybe some of the variety.
Yeah, there's, so that if you go, can you go back to the very first slide? That shows that basin. And so when I was doing the Mead Hawthorne, during that process, it took a while to get that geodatabase in and the ranking and have it. So when you're out there collecting data, and I'd go start and I'd be like, oh, that's not working. And I'd have to kind of reorganize it and redo the geodatabase and kind of shuffle things around. And so by the time I did the racetrack, I was going through there and I was like, well, it's pretty residential, and we're not focusing on residential. And so there was, it went pretty fast. There wasn't a whole lot of sites to really inventory, because we're, specifically said we're staying out of the residential areas. And so, and then we were going to do the Haines, and I was like, well, Knollwood has a way bigger expanse of really dense impervious and residential mixed in there with open spaces. And the Haines, I wanted to get to the Haines, but then you look at South Canyon, and we're really inventorying big commercial impervious sites, and you look at that basin and there's not a lot of impervious sites. And I've studied it. I've done HMS model on there, so I know there's issues. It gets tremendous amount of flow coming in through there, and then once it hits that concrete channel and it's trying to zigzag through that neighborhood and stuff there. And so we definitely should do it. I'm not saying that we don't do it, but we just didn't get to it. We just didn't have time to get to it, and it definitely needs to be looked at. But there's not going to be a whole lot of points in there. Just looking at, it's a pretty expansive basin with a lot of upgradient. We're going to be ranking, all the sites are going to be ranked pretty low because there's no impervious, there's nothing directly connected,
Well, that may be something that, I don't want to interrupt you, but that may be something to examine is the ranking and role of impervious in how that generates, some of those erosive, downstream, deliveries. Because back a long time ago when there was still dirt, I worked on an HMS model on the Wonderland Basin and a heck grass model and some of those drainages. And I live over in the South Canyon Basin, and I know that it runs red in an instant, and it floods streets. And so that impervious factor is not always the driving factor on what causes problems. Because when we did Wonderland, that was not all impervious, but it ran red just like that. So there's some things I think that could be applicable or need to be teased out on those other kinds of basins that may have a big impact on the upstream reaches of Rapid Creek in particular. And that could have applicability in other communities that aren't heavily impervious, but still generate significant amounts of sediment to impact their local stream, whether it's Battle Creek and Keystone, or whether it's Spring Creek and Hill City, or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, I see this data becoming part of a bigger tool. This tool isn't answering all the questions. It was really devised to rank the sites on potential retrofitting green infrastructure sites. So it definitely needs to be looked at further of each sub-basin within that bigger basin, and there's a lot of different variables that really need to be looked at, for sure. Yeah.
Can you share this presentation with us?
Yeah, I think you got it.
It's really hard to see on the screen.
There's a,
It would be nice to be
you
able to-
should have a report.
Okay.
Well, I think
Okay.
I think you keep it, don't you, or download it?
I
Or,
can, I'll pull it up.
Dan, did you have a question?
Well, I just
Or
wanted
comment?
to mention on the racetrack, I'm looking through your report, and you mentioned the Hawthorne ditch, and it creating problems with people along that ditch, and I just wanted to say I'm one of those people. And I'm glad you mentioned it, and that should go into the score. For that, and I'm not sure if you were aware, but the county paid for a study done by some School of Mines students specifically on the area I'm talking about, out by Longview and Carlin Drive. So I don't know if you were aware of that study, but it's on our website.
I'll have to look.
Okay.
No, but I am aware that that was the basin that I did in Kenner's modeling class. So I was aware of it. I got an HMS model for
I was
it.
wondering how you.
It floods all those houses,
Yeah, so that should go in.
at least on my model.
That's the same class I built my model for as Kenner, Wonderland Basin.
Yeah.
So, Jan, do you have this in PDF?
Yes, should I, you wanted them to look at this and
on the site?
give comments, right, before we.
Yeah, there's
post
just,
it anywhere.
so we have all this data, so we're talking with the city is this data going to go on Rapid Map, and, so there's a little bit of figuring out of what's the best way to, get the data out to people and have it be available. And so there's still some things that we need to work on, so the project's not completely 100% wrapped up. But we'll get those
That was another
details.
question I had, was how is it going to be shared with the city and the county?
Yeah, and those are the things that we're working on.
I just like the PDF so I can zoom in on,
Yeah, this does say draft, so you,
yeah, okay.
Yeah, it still is gonna be, once that information is known and we know like where to access that data and if it's gonna be on Rapid Map or if it's gonna be, we're still sorting that out. And so once we get that figured out, I'll be adding to that report and finalizing it.
what's the timetable for that?
While we're in the process of doing it, so I would think by next meeting, we'd have it all figured out.
Our March meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
So at that point, whose court does the ball bounce back into when your report is done?
City.
You said, here's the final report. Whose court does the ball go into now? Is it up to this board to figure out how to maybe take some of this stuff and start funding projects, or do we go to the city, the school district, or? I mean, I hate to see this just become another report or plan that gets put on a shelf, because there's some good action.
Yeah.
Well, the city is aware that we're doing this, and Dan and I have met with him I don't know how many times, several times.
Yeah, and I've talked with them on, like, the city's been, a part of it, or, it's been hands-on and.
I really love
and
the
stuff,
idea
so.
of involving the kids. I think that's a really great idea, to show them the sustainability of it.
How do we get from the paper to the book, where we say, let's do this one, we're gonna fund this, let's do this?
Dan, you might want to address it.
Well, I can offer, my perspective is that, I haven't intended that, we would look at like feasibility studies or the like. I have intended this as basically a starting point where I can take these results, and as I ride my bicycle around town or drive around town, I'll have something where I can say, okay, here's an area I can go look at, and at some point in time, I'll start knocking on doors of, churches, and, I've been in a fair amount of contact with, city, different departments in the city. I'll talk more on this erosion control end of things too, but I guess there is no action item other than what we as a group may decide to look at, but I just see so much opportunity, to mitigate the stormwater. I guess one thing we kind of hopped over, but I'll ask Linda. She'll probably know the answer here. But how often, when you're sampling, water in your sampling sites, and I realize there's no way to nail down a hard answer, but in general, is water quality in Rapid Creek, under storm flow conditions, typically within the standards for suspended sediment, or typically are we in exceedance of suspended sediment under storm flow conditions?
I guess I can't verify it with facts, but I would say we would be in exceedance under stormwater.
It's pretty
conditions.
typical when we've got a storm runoff condition.
At least for
The
the
suspended
board,
sediment
yeah.
is exceeding the criteria, the beneficial use criteria. And so, to me, this is simply a very simple starting point to how could we start finding places where we could, begin to accomplish some water quality improvements. And so I think it's, what I envision is that, maybe we could help begin to develop a culture of awareness that here is how we could begin to improve the resource. One step at a time, one small step at a time. Does that help?
Jason, did you want feedback from the board on this draft?
Oh, it's up to you guys in here.
Just wanted to ask.
Jason, the one thing that I think I would like to see, just because I live on the outskirts of Rapid and represent a lot of people that live outside of Rapid City, is an idea. I think this is super beneficial, first of all, and thank you for your presentation. But I think that for the record, I would love to see an idea of how this would benefit more Pennington County and not just Rapid City, because it feels like that's the focus here is Rapid. And I love Rapid, but, it just, there's more to Pennington County than just Rapid City. And that doesn't feel like it's a focus, which may be just,
No, I agree with
but
you 100%.
it would be really
If we could
nice
get-
to hear more about how are we going to impact all of Pennington County and not just Rapid City.
If we could build an upstream, downstream connection, and that's super
And
valuable.
involve many people in the community and not just the churches and the schools of Rapid City.
Absolutely.
Just a thought.
Do you have contacts?
I do. I can find them. Very resourceful.
That's the biggest battle.
That's right.
Getting them there. They say you build it and they'll come, but I don't know.
Dang right.
Ron had another question.
As you're wrapping this pilot up, is there a way that you can, obviously we had this X number of this budget. Can you help us understand what the pieces and parts of it took? So let's say if we wanted to do another drainage basin,
Oh,
someplace,
absolutely.
you could tell us based on what inputs you had and how how the costs rolled out to do a drainage basin that we could scale, you know, or move around to another one.
Well, now that the database is, you know, built and, you know, other than really refining it and getting it to where it works for multiple basins, now it's collecting data. You know, so a big chunk of it was getting it to make sense and working that out and working through that.
Right.
You know, so, you know, the racetrack, I did that in, I think, 4 days. You know, 3-4 days, all the data was collected and verified and put in there. Knollwood took quite a bit. I was going to do Haynes, but I looked at Knollwood and I was like, Knollwood's going to be way more intense than Haynes, so I did Knollwood, and Knollwood was probably a couple weeks worth of time to do it. You know, if you were to go and just collect data and field verify data, you know, it was a couple weeks worth of time. But, you know, the Mead Hawthorne took a chunk because it was figuring it out, you know, figuring out the ranking and how it all worked. And I'd rank sites and I'd go and score them and be like, oh, is that making sense, you know? And
so you'd be able to tell us on some level of, you know, obviously there's going to be, you know,
I could add that. I could add a little section in the.
But you know, if it's this kind of a basin with this kind of development with this kind of, you know, area, you know, this is what it took, and so maybe you could apply it, you know, to a different kind of a basin with a different kind of development almost.
Yep. I even have a field in there that has the site visit date, so it kind of logs the date and kind of timestamps it. So
that would be real interesting if it's possible without a big hoorah.
You bet.
Okay, thanks, Jason. I think we're good.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Dan, you got the second part of yours on 12.
Right,
So go ahead on that.
12 and a half,
Yeah.
or whatever. So, kind of the same situation, just kind of the big picture, you know, why does this matter to West Dakota relative to erosion control? You know, Dr. Lingwall will give a progress report here, but this slide shows an area on the west end of the School of Mines campus, and you know, it's kind of hard to see, you know, with the light being the way it is and the distance to the screen, but basically a lot of bare shale ground, exposed shale in here. You know, when we have hard rain, suspended sediment straight down into the street and on down to Rapid Creek. So it's kind of the same deal that I guess I viewed when I look around. What can we do to improve our resource? One of the things that could come easiest would be to really try to reduce the suspended sediment load through erosion control. And there's a lot of good candidate areas around town. I'll just buzz through a few examples here. So if you continue, you know, from this building on up through the, you know, this erosive area and on up the hill, you're going to end up at the National Weather Service building, which is on the east end of Star Village. So our next slide, you know, just a few bullets. The intent of this project is to first test various methods for revegetation of these erosive slopes in challenging settings, and to further monitor the results, see if we can determine which methods are going to be the most suitable, give us the best results. You know, I look at this as a way to gain experience for what might be future erosion control projects that we might be interested in pursuing, and you know, it further serve as a demonstration project for other entities might want to kind of see what it shapes up as. So next, excuse me, the next slide I mentioned, you know, from the campus it leads up to Weather Service Star Village. Well, this is the north side of Star Village, so the street is on the east side. That's East Boulevard. This isn't a street; it's basically a driveway into an apartment area. But up above here, you know, we've got a very large slope that's in very bad condition, and then other areas farther to the west and southwest, another one back in here. You know, the amount of sediment coming off there, you know, I guess I don't see a need to measure it, but, you know, visually, the next slide will show us, next slide and several to come, you know, kind of the nature of the problem. You can see the gullies that have been developing there over time. We're down cutting rapidly. You know, obviously somebody put some silt fences in here some years ago. They, I guess they helped some. There's a lot more help that could be needed. Next slide will just show a few more. This is looking from that driveway that runs west towards these apartments I mentioned. So you can see that there's, you know, more silt fences along here that have actually kind of ended up terracing the thing. You know, there's been a little bit of stabilization has occurred. Next slide is just another view, you know, from a little bit farther west, you know, looking to the east. You know, there it's grassed in kind of okay. Next slide is kind of one tier down, and, you know, it's pretty clear, you know, one major event, you could kind of blow the whole thing out of there. It certainly would be nice if we could find a way to, you know, to fix this at some point in time. And I guess one of the perspectives, an area like this is kind of a no man's land. There's actually two different landowners up in there, and you know, one of them is very, very interested in working with us on this. Another one, they're actually headquarters out of Florida. So far, I've not been successful in talking to the, you know, the Florida management people, you know, which would be kind of a key. But there are many, many other places around where we've got similar situations. The next slide. So this is the west end of Star Village. So we've got two city reservoirs up here, and, you know, again, when you're sitting on your computer, it just stands out. You know, you've got these erosional scars. They're coming down into the several houses and streets. You know, that's actually owned by the city of Rapid City. They're interested in working with us on this. They just soon would get our feet wet somewhere else first. They're kind of concerned from a liability standpoint. City's always concerned about that if something would go wrong, you know, these residents down here would want to blame them, and that's part of the reason for doing the pilot project with the School of Mines. You know, we kind of picked an area where everyone said, here's an easy place to test the waters. So the next slide, this is on the south side then of Star Village, and you know, that one sticks out pretty good. There's a pretty large area, pretty easy to see what we've got going on, and you go in there after any sort of a rainstorm, you know, the gutter is just lined with silt, you know, what silt dropped out at the very tail end of the runoff event. You know, everything else just continued on down earlier in the storm. Next slide just takes us across the street. So this is 5th Street, you know, north being to the right, so we're looking to the west. So this is Clark Street that goes up the hill to what is 6th Street. I've driven up and down 5th Street, I don't know how many thousands of times here in the last several decades, but anytime it snows, the snow piles up here and it dribbles on down. And well, no, silt comes, usually the silt's gone. It doesn't dribble along like snowbanks, but there's a lot of exposed shale out in here. The next slide's going to zero us in a little bit. This is from Rapid Map. It shows the land ownership. So what really stands out is that, you know, this is 6th Street, and this is the right-of-way for 6th Street. This is owned by the city. And then this is South Street. You know, same thing, you know, the city ownership, you know, the city's got a lot of these areas that are problem areas, and, you know, I've been talking with them about what are the possibilities here, and, you know, more discussions to come. So the next slide is one more from this vicinity. That little hilltop that's that's west of Fifth, west of Star Village, is called Hillcrest. So this would be the west side of Hillcrest. This is Mount Rushmore Road, and then this is Clark Street again, coming in from the west. And you can see a bit of a scar here and another one over here. And again, the land ownership, this is city right-of-way. I know it's hard to see, but that's city right-of-way. The right-of-way extends right on up into this, rapid erosion area. So the next slide, we're just going to be looking at it from the west. So here we're looking east on Clark Street, from the west, and this is the scar that's owned by the city, and there are actually 4 other landowners in there that are within that active erosion area, and then plus another one here farther to the north. So lots of opportunities in that part of town. And then the next slide, I've kind of been focusing some of my thoughts in that area because I've made a lot of connections there. But we've actually had some discussions a while back with the National Guard and Stevens High, and at this distance and with lights on, it doesn't show up real good, but there's just a lot of red, exposed shale throughout this area and many other neighborhoods out there, and it's a very similar situation with a few other minor nuances involved. But beyond that, I think the next slide takes us back full circle to where we started. And same thing, if anyone has any kind of big picture questions they want to ask before we hear from Dr. Lingwall, now would be your chance.
Any questions for Dan? I guess.
I'm sorry to be a dissenter, Director Driscoll, but what I hear a lot of is private landowners and Rapid City owns. So I guess I'm concerned about that right off the bat, that this is not necessarily all of Pennington County's taxpayer responsibility. And I'm just saying that as a preface to Dr. Lingwall. So.
I would like to respond to that. So both the areas that he showed is my district, which are Pennington County taxpayers,
Sure.
which fairly never get any board funding or even board looking because it is within the city.
Mm-hmm.
So if I went and walked around and they said, what do you actually do for your area? This is something I can say.
Sure.
Now, there are different things throughout the county, so that also has to be remembered when we look at these projects. It's a give and take. So sometimes, I funded Keystone, I funded water pipeline projects, I funded this. Likely never going to affect my district, my taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
But I know it's good for the county, it's good for the district, it's good for the area, because if one district succeeds, we all succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to kind of keep that mentality in, even though it's like it's Safeway parking lot. Well, that goes right to my house.
Okay.
Literally, if you look at the map that Jason put for the Meade Hawthorne, take the yellow dot and you go up to the next street. That is my street. That gets flooded every year. We've lost 2 cars in my district due to the heavy flooding. And so this is why it's important. It's not, I understand completely, like, how are you going to tell a person from Hill City why this is important to them?
Mm-hmm.
But for people in my district, this is something that I can say we're actually looking into. So that would be my counter argument to your point and concern.
Fair enough. Yep, understand.
I have a request.
Yes.
Can you turn this fan off?
It's cold.
It is cold.
Whew, burn.
All right. You ought to do that, Dan, or?
No, I don't.
He can figure that out while I'm talking. To introduce myself, I'm Dr. Brett Lingwall. I'm an assistant professor at South Dakota School of Mines. I'm joined here today by Heidi Seiberding, who's one of our research scientists, who is also working on the pilot project for the shale erosion control. One of the reasons we're attracted to this project and doing it from a research perspective is because it's, and to get to your point, it's not just a Rapid City problem. This is a Black Hills problem. I mean, this is common to anywhere where we have these outcroppings of the various types of shale, the Belfou shale, Pierre shale, the red shales. They're everywhere. The Black Gap down was Highway 79, the Black Gap, probably a prominent example of these locations. So the other reason we're interested in these problems is because there's a gravity issue. A lot of the erosion control technologies that are on the market work really well when things are relatively flat. The revegetated area that was on the slide a few minutes ago, where there was the burn scar that was eroding, and then down at the bottom it had grassed in. Well, it grassed in where it was easy to grass in, where it was flat. The problems we have in the Black Hills on these exposed shells tend to be where the ground is pretty steep, and where it's hard to apply a lot of the technologies that have been used for a long time. People have used straw mulches for a long time, but in a heavy rain, it's steep, we have a gravity problem, they just wash away. People have used hydroseeding. Hydroseeding works pretty well when it's flat, but if it's too steep, we have a velocity problem and it can wash away. So what we're trying to do is take a range of the technologies that are commonly used by the DOT, Pennington County Conservation Service has a number of technologies they have, and other things that are being developed. And we're trying to do a pilot project in a living lab that says, if we put all of these technologies, we line them up, what works best? If none of them work, we have an answer. And we know that none of the technologies are really going to be viable, and we need to maybe develop something new or Harris. I don't know what the solution is. But we'll get to that point when we get there. Maybe we find that half the technologies work really well and half don't. But at least we know what we can start recommending to property owners, agencies, people who are dealing with these issues. Whether it's public ground, private ground, I don't care. I'm in the technology development business. So what we've been doing is we've had this site, which is just west of the dorms and the civil building on campus. There's an old volleyball court that's kind of that rectangular flat area. And it's a fairly steep hillside. And we've selected this area to be our living lab. The Rocker Trails, the bike trail project wraps around the site, which provides easy access, but the bike trail is going around the site, which is that kind of the grayish area where the shell is eroding. To date, we have performed all of our baseline geotechnical characterizations, and we've done all of our soil testing. We've tested 6 different locations on the site for the soils, and predictably, it's awful shell. The chemistry is just horrible. It's your classic sodic soil. It's salty and it's alkali. I mean, it's just, if you were to select a topsoil to put in your yard, it's the absolute worst stuff you would ever want to put in your yard to grow grass. Which is why we have a lot of these problems all around town. Along with the characterization that we did in the fall, we completed our survey. We did a drone-based survey where we had a student flying the drone. Humorous story. She was out there flying the drone, doing the imaging in the morning, and I was out there standing next to her, and nobody gave her any fuss. But in the afternoon, she had to go to a second flight when the light was a little bit different. And of course, campus safety and the police are showing up and wondering why she's flying a drone. But while I'm out there looking all professorial and intimidating, nobody stops her. But as soon as I'm not there, she gets harassed by the police. So we've learned our lesson that I've always got to stand out there and scowl at people who drive by so we can get our survey. The survey has turned out really well. We have 5-centimeter accuracy. Plus or minus the grass, so actually turned out to be a really good survey. And so we have a meeting that we're trying to schedule with our team. So the semester's just started, and in the schedule we had scheduled this to kind of be the design phase because we assumed we would have 4 or 5 inches of snow out there because it's winter in Rapid City and you'd think you'd have snow, but instead it's beautiful weather. But we're having a meeting this week where we brought in 2 additional undergraduate students. They're freshmen. Heidi hand-selected them from her freshman civil engineering class. We've got 2 of the all-stars coming in to help us this semester finish the design work, and then we'll transition into construction later spring, weather pending, of course, because, well, weather controls everything. So we have a number of the technologies have been selected. We've got the survey done. We've got our baseline characterization all done, and we're kicking off the design phase on Thursday. As long as you can make it. Check your emails.
Okay.
The students got back to me during this meeting of when they could actually meet. So that's our update we have for you, and hopefully we'll have a design, a layout, either next meeting or the meeting after, depending on how progress goes on the design phase.
Okay, very good. Any questions?
What's your target date to plant some?
Weather depending. We could go as, so we have a lot of the species we're looking at, there's seeds. We can do seeds really at any time. And we've also been looking at sapling size. And we could do those as long as the ground's not frozen. We had kind of thought March, April would be good times. We want to get things seeded before the kind of late May, June thunderstorms start sweeping in. Because on previous project, we've identified that that's the worst time to try to do anything, because we've got to get stuff established either before the storms come in, or we have to put some sort of a blanket in and to protect and shelter. So we have some of the technologies we're looking at, the compost, vegetated compost blankets. We also have a number of geotextiles that we've evaluated. And I'm afraid that winning technology may be a geotextile sheet that covers the whole slope and then is punctured, and where you can plant, shrubs and trees and different things. I'm afraid that may be the winning technology. It will not be very sightly, but it may be very effective. So obviously aesthetics go into this. But to answer the question, we'd like to do March, April, so we can get things established before those thunderstorms start coming through. I can deal with light rain, but if we get, one of those inch-an-hour storms, it's all gone.
So will you do like sections of different
Yep.
technologies?
So sections coming down the slope, also in that gray area. It starts on one side, it comes around, and it wraps around.
And how many different technologies are you going to?
Depends on how far we can stretch the dollar. So
But you have them chosen already.
we have about 35 technologies in a spreadsheet and a matrix we're evaluating. We've got dozens of plant species and grass mixes. We'll never be able to do it all. So that's part of what we're doing over the next couple of months, is doing a down selection and really having the students really look at the prices and availability. Because if there's something that's going to be like $2 a square foot treatment, we could blow our budget on one plot, right? So we have to weigh a number of different things. But it's a good exercise, because the recommendations for homeowners, private property, public agencies, whoever uses this, the cost is a big part of that. So the return on the investment is a key metric to the final product.
Any other questions? Yes, Heidi?
You better not be making you better be making a comment, not just being a question.
I am making a comment. So for the new members of the board who were not here for our original presentation, one of the things that is intended is, because this is a living laboratory, there will be signs explaining how to do this, what was done and what worked and what didn't work. They'll be available. And we're planning on having the Rapid City Pathways programs in the different schools be able to come and see, and when kids come on tours of the school mines, then this will be something that we can walk them out to and show them, all right, this is what engineers do, this is how you can stabilize slopes, and hey, maybe you could do this in your backyard.
So in terms of contract, our contract runs through the end of summer, so your final report will be, this is a short-term success, but the idea here is to monitor this for decades to come, and to use this as an annual monitoring event for high school students, for elementary school students, for different classes. So the intent here is to gather a year's worth of data, but your contract is only a year. So there's multiple things happening here, and we'll keep the board updated as time goes on and things progress. And it may be that the short-term winner is not the winner in 5 years, but our contract will be long gone by the time we'll know what the 5-year winner is. So the relationship will maintain. It's not like School of Mines is not going anywhere.
How big of an area is that?
It's pretty big. It's,
Several acres.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's not, there are a lot bigger.
We measured it, but I forget the number.
There's a lot bigger erosive areas than that around.
Yeah.
The surface
Yeah.
area is more like that. Yeah. So you're looking at about a 45-degree slope.
If not a little steeper in some spots. These pictures do not give it justice of how steep it is.
And then this information would be shared with like city, county,
pamphlet, the goal is to have some pamphlets and things for homeowners and for, you know, a quick decision guide type thing to distribute. That was one of the comments from the previous panel. The panel mentioned that they wanted more of those widely distributable products rather than just a report, because a report no one's going to use, to be honest.
And that's in part why it's the freshman undergraduate students, is because if they can understand it, if they can communicate it before they have 4 years of engineering under their belt, then we're going to be communicating with people in general, not just technical professionals.
And we'll also have them for 3 years on campus to help us with the data collection, and they'll already know, and they can help bring in the next generation and kind of have this living laboratory thing be this continuous benefit to the public outreach and education, as well as some data that will hopefully benefit the West Dakota region for a while.
Very good. Well, thanks for coming and giving us an update.
Thank you.
So that was number 14. Number 15, John Carroll from Game Fish and Parks is here to give a report on the dredging project at Canyon Lake. Ron, do you want to introduce him?
Well, I can introduce John. He's the habitat biologist for this part of the state. He works for the Game and Fish Department. This project came on board, I mean, my name's behind it, but it came on board before I was on the board.
Right.
It was a significant expenditure, you know, of board funds for a focused project, but I think in the end, that expenditure is going to be able to be moved around. Actually, the dredge will go around, you know, in our district and to other places where it can be used now that they've figured out how to use it. And John's going to tell us all about how they figured out how to use it and what went right and what went wrong and how much it cost.
All right, thanks, Ron. Yeah, just a little background. This started with Canyon Lake was going to be when the city replaced the spillway back in 15, 16. They're going to dredge the lake also mechanically with excavators when it was drained. But the problem that happened was there was a lot of water that came through, high flows through the wintertime, and that kind of eliminated that project. So Tim Rogers, who was on the board here a few years back, said, well, what if we do this? You know, West Dakota could put money into it, you know, the city, the fly fishers, and a DNR grant ended up paying for the dredge and materials. And then in turn, we were going to operate the dredge, and then it could be used in western South Dakota afterwards. So this is just a little bit about the dredging project. A lot of people have seen it if you've been down to Canyon Lake. If you're not, it's just about wrapped up, but we have some other projects planned, which you're more than welcome to see. So just a little bit of an update. Go over the project timeline, kind of the areas we dredged, the volume of material that was taken out, kind of the removal plan for the remaining bags that are on shore right now, kind of our staff hours, cost per cubic yard, and kind of future projects I'll discuss. So just kind of the timeline. We started in October of 2019. We basically worked a month and a half after some training from Geoform International. It came out of Kansas, the dredge. They came out for 3 days, did some training with us on kind of the bags, how to lay them out, connection of the pipes, essentially dredge operation. The cabling system, it's really hard to see in these pictures, but we have cables running along each shoreline, and then the dredge also has a cable that it's guided upon. So we basically cut paths across the lake. These are the areas that we actually covered. This area, these are the acres right here. There's about 10.3 acres overall, and a total volume of 8,400 cubic yards that came out. So this portion was done last fall, and the remaining portion was done starting in May, and we finished on December 10th, December 10th we finished up. All the bags were essentially placed right in front of the chop house. There's still 5 bags remaining right there. This pipe, this is actually a pipe that's buried under the sediment, which allows flows to be bypassed through Canyon Lake. Yes?
Could you translate, how many cubic yards you've got to an average depth, my mental arithmetic? wouldn't be quite quick enough to do it myself. How much?
Well, it varied so much in here. Like when you look in this whole area right here, we probably covered, even though we spent a lot of time, it's fairly shallow, rocky. That's about 3,000 cubic yards. So the rest of it, essentially, the majority of the sediment came out from this area. You know, about 5,000 cubic yards here, and another 500 to 1,000 in that portion. Does that help you there?
Well, if you converted cubic yards to cubic feet and subtracted by total square feet in your 10 acres, it would average out to however many inches or feet of depth. Did you calculate that by chance?
I
I
can't answer right off the top of my head. I mean,
No, I won't.
I think it's like 34,000 cubic feet, and then I can't remember the depth over that time. I could get that information, but right off my head, I don't have that.
The answer is no, you didn't calculate that. So.
I do calculate it.
Are you doing it right now?
Heidi's calculating.
I'll work on it.
Okay. Essentially, what it translated into was about 9 bags that are 190 feet long, 4 feet high, and 40 feet wide, 45 feet wide in depth. That's kind of that volume, if you can picture it that way too. But so the removal plan, we have 5 bags left on shore. This is basically the cut pattern that the dredge cuts, 6 feet wide at a time. So we do 3 passes. And that was about a 3-foot depth cut that we made through this portion right here. So basically we do 3 passes, move the cable system over, and keep cutting. So essentially, I don't have a real good picture of the dredge right here, but it's a vacuum, essentially. So it's like a snow blower pulling in water and sediment. Basically, has pipes that are connected to these bags. The bags dewater over time, and you're left with a big loaf of compacted mud and sediment and vegetation in there. And then those are essentially hauled off with a dozer and a side dump. Those went to the cement plant for reclamation purposes. Down to the nitty-gritty, this is essentially what we did, about almost 3,300 hours of staff time, basically at a cost of $43,000, almost $44,000. It varied. You know, there's some biologists there. We mainly have seasonal interns running this to save some money. Fuel costs were about $3,500. Sediment bags for the project were $47,000. Cost of material, of hauling that material, was $45,000, or will be. We'll have a better idea when we haul those final 5 bags off. Supplies, the materials and repairs for the dredge are about $4,000 for a total operational cost of $143,000 for dredging that, which comes to $17 a cubic yard, which isn't too bad. I mean, if you look at any project where you have to haul sediment off, it can exceed that. And if you look at, let me go back to the first slide, for this one right here, Canyon Lake was really complex. You know, if we're doing a 3-acre standard lake, we'll set up the cable system one time and just go from there. With Canyon Lake, it's quite a bit different. So we had about 13 or 14 different cable moves that we did just to cut different paths and patterns through there. So it's a little more time consuming, still taking staff time, but it's factored into the cost per cubic yard. So, so probably in February we'll haul the remaining bags off. And Ron was talking about some of the takeaways. It's interesting. Canyon Lake, tremendous amount of usage. I mean, kayakers, anglers, hikers, bird watchers, all year long. They were highly appreciative of what this project was doing for the lake. Talked about the large number of cable moves, which did take some more time. Vegetation was a problem. That did plug up the dredge fairly often. That kind of prolonged the project a little bit. And like I said, when we're working on smaller impoundments, the cost per cubic yard is typically going to be cheaper, especially if there's areas that we can leave those sediment bags, just seed them and let them grow over, rather than hauling the material away. We did find a drone, Goodyear tires, a lot of landscaping fabric, fence posts, waders, you name it. golf balls, fishing line, a lot of fishing line in Canyon Lake. And then
Any bodies?
they might have gone right to the bags. We didn't. We never did find an actual body, fortunately, but. The cement plant took it for reclamation of some of their sites. As they dig, they're using it to reclaim those.
Is that where the final 5 bags are also going?
It will, yeah. And like I said, a lot of sites will kind of take priority if the material doesn't even have to be hauled away, because that's a big cost savings. There's a lot of areas where these bags, I showed it in another presentation I did, but we had cottonwood trees just sprouting out of those like crazy. So, I mean, it's rich material. There's even possibilities of if people want to come and get it. I mean, you know, we're open to doing things like that too. So, be really good garden soil. Muskrats, they'd like to build nests inside the engine every night. So, yeah, there's some interesting things that happen for sure.
Hey, John.
Yes.
So there was, I think when I first started here, which was May, I think we talked about these a little bit, and we did talk about the public being able to come in and take advantage of some of this.
Yeah,
is that, I mean,
yeah, and
is that a consideration, or is that something, I mean, that's probably extra work, and I know, I don't know if the cement plant pays any kind of money. I think that might have been talked about too. Do
No.
they actually pay to, you know, take advantage of some of that? But also just the public being able to come in and... Yep.
Yeah, we actually did talk about that. And the cement plant, they're not paying for it. We needed a close location to keep costs down for hauling it away. And we didn't know if we could get rid of that amount of material, just having people come in and do you set up we could set up a day and have someone sit there and, you know, load up, you know, a pickup load at a time. It's a lot of pickup loads. But no, the cement plant even brought that idea up. I mean, there's a possibility they might set it out in their parking lot, one of these loads, for people to take. So I will discuss that more with them.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And some of the future projects that we have lined up, our outdoor campus West Pond. I don't know if you've walked the walking path behind our office. There's a nice little pond there that has a lot of sediment. That one is open for public fishing, so we want to improve that. It has a fishing pier on it. Sunday Gulch, which is up on corner of 244 and 385 on the way to Sylvan Lake. That's a project that Ron worked on and built a long time ago. Strawberry Hill Pond, that's Forest Service owns that. It has a lot of good ADA access on it, but it's full of cattails, highly sedimented in. A bunch of small dams in Custer State Park we have lined up. Sylvan Lake, the inlet area, we're going to deepen eventually. And Tisdale Ramp in the inlet area there also. So, I mean, this list grows and grows. We have about 10 or 15 more that we're already considering. So, and the nice thing about these, different than Canyon Lake, probably a month at a time, kind of get in and out with those projects. So it's really going to be a big benefit for a lot of areas. And even some of the bigger lakes, you know, we'll concentrate on fishing areas, boat ramp areas, and inlets. You know, yes?
How often do you have to do Canyon Lake work? Every 5, 6 years, 10 years, or what?
You know, even now, I mean, there's more that can be done. Problem with Canyon Lake is even though we dredge sediment out, it's still going to have some. It's very clear. There's nutrients in that system. A lot of problem is vegetation that grows in there. It's going to grow even after we're done. The city's going to have to continue to get in there. They have a weed harvester, and that'll help. If they continue to remove that, that's less that's going to build up in there. But it's like any of our lakes. I mean, they're 70 years old, 80 years old, a lot of them. It's just going to be a continual problem, you know, as we move along. So, you know, the dredge, which was mostly paid by West Dakota, I mean, it's going to be a big benefit, I think, on a lot of, especially smaller impoundments. So.
How does it impact the fish?
Well, very little. I mean, that's the beauty of the system. We didn't have to drain the lake, so everyone could still use it as we were working. the fish were swimming around the dredge. It didn't seem to bother them at all. I mean, we're kicking up some things, they're feeding on that. The ducks were all around us. I mean, it had really little impact on, everything around us, so, which was good. So you don't have to drain the lake, it doesn't stink so bad. It's time consuming, but where it's really going to shine is on those smaller bodies of water for sure. Canyon Lake was a difficult one to deal with, for sure.
Any other questions?
Are any of these projects actually scheduled? You don't have to.
Yeah, the outdoor campus pond we're going to do this spring. Sunday Gulch we're going to do right after that, and then hopefully if we get all the permitting done with the Forest Service, we'll do Strawberry Hill Pond too.
And where is Tisdale Ramp?
Tisdale Lake is a small lake that is east of Rapid about 30 miles, and then to the north another 10 roughly.
Public fishing?
Oh yeah, yep. Everything we do is going to be a public body of water. Yep. Did you figure that out?
So if it was distributed across the area, the entire area, it would be about half a foot. But because most of it was coming from that smaller area of the curve, I'm guessing from the different numbers, it's probably 3 foot.
Yeah, I mean, there's areas that are.
3 foot?
Oh yeah, we took 3 feet and more out of certain areas, and really 6 inches out of others. I mean, especially that inlet area, it's shallow, it's rock. You hit the little channel.
It's probably deeper towards the dam.
It's about 13 feet by the dam. Yep. That's why our main concern was really. I mean, from the fishery standpoint and usage standpoint, that's what I was mainly concerned with in clearing that out. I mean, that's why I was glad we got a lot of material out of here, and in this area. But, to really deepen this, which it could use more, that would require excavation on some of that hard material.
All right. Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Okay, item 16, designate chair and appoint a committee to review and negotiate new annual contract with administrator for April. Tom?
So about 3 years ago, we agreed to have Dan as our administrator with a 3-year option. And so Dan's current contract comes due on April. And so what I am proposing and making a motion to is to create a committee to review Dan's old contract and to see if he wants to negotiate anything different or any updates to the contract due to workload, and then have that committee present it to the board so that we can vote on it in March is what we're trying to do. So the formal motion is I would like to form a committee to negotiate Dan's contract for his 3rd-year option.
And you're the chair of that?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will take the chair of that.
Are you looking for volunteers tonight?
I'm looking for volunteers if somebody wants to help 1 or 2 people, or I can.
I'll help Mark.
Okay, Randy, how about one more? How about the treasurer? We'll have the treasurer.
Okay.
Okay, that's 3. I think that's enough. Okay?
I volunteered too late because I did, I think, help a little bit.
Oh, okay.
But
So, I don't think there's a motion needed, we'll just.
Okay, that's fine as long as everybody's okay with the committee form. Actually, you can appoint a committee, so you appoint the committee that we had just mentioned.
I will appoint the committee as we just mentioned.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, that brings me to the chair's comments. One of the things I was going to bring up here quickly is that, and Galen left, but for the Western South Dakota Hydrology Conference in April, Dan, we budgeted $2,000 for that, didn't we?
I believe so.
I was going to ask him because that's in April
Yeah,
and the
they
fee.
never came back. Nobody asked us for anything yet.
I'm sure they will. Oh, are you asking us? Joanne?
I'm Joanne Noyes, I'm with the Geological Survey, and I am on the committee with the Western Hydrology Conference, along with the United States Geological Survey. And we do every year come in.
Just stand by the mic, please.
Sorry, we do come in every year to request the 2,000. Last year, the conference was canceled, so we didn't use that money that was requested last year. This year, I see on the agenda, we have a March meeting before
Yes.
the conference is going to be
That's why I brought it
scheduled.
up.
So I made a note to myself to come in at that meeting to request it, because I'm usually the one that does that. That way, I can get the write-up about our luncheon speaker. And at this point, we're really not sure how the conference is going to be held due to the COVID stuff. We may have it online, and we may have it in person. We're not sure yet. So that's where I think we'll have to wait till the March meeting.
We'll put you on the agenda then.
Thank you.
Dan? That's the only thing I had. I was going to ask Galen, but glad you're still here. Items from other directors? None? Okay. Oh, you have?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Unless you want to go first, Dan?
Go ahead.
Oh, I got two.
I have talked with just a few of the other directors, wondering whether to continue with having the invocation at our meetings. And nobody is opposed to it, but they're also willing to just let it go. And so I was just looking for kind of a straw poll. Do we want to keep having an invocation or not?
Yeah, I was one of the ones that was talking to her about
Yeah.
that. I've attended meetings at the state of South Dakota. They, like the Water Management Board, the DENR meetings down there, they do not have an invocation. Matter of fact, they don't have a Pledge of Allegiance. So it's probably a good time to get input from especially our new directors and see if we want to continue to have an invocation at the beginning of the meeting. Does anybody have?
I just assume not.
Okay. Anybody else?
I would just assume not.
Pardon me?
No,
You don't?
I agree with him.
Okay. How about any other?
I'd be okay with dropping it.
Yeah, I would too personally. So
That would be my preference. I won't be offering to give the invocation.
I'm good with that, Chairman. I really like the Pledge of Allegiance, though.
yeah, I'm not. I think we ought to keep the Pledge of Allegiance. Should we do that by a motion, Dan? What do you think?
Well, we can't tonight because it's not an agenda item.
That's true. That's true.
But I don't know, if we need a motion next month or next meeting, we can do that.
Let's do that then.
Whatever's comfortable, yeah.
Okay. Maybe we can just put that on the agenda and then handle it at the next meeting. Okay?
Or it could be the executive committee sets the agenda. If you feel that you've had enough input, it could just disappear from my perspective.
I think that's how we should handle it.
That is a possibility, yeah.
Okay.
Because you are the chair, you do set the agenda, so.
Okay, we'll just handle it that way.
Yep, unless there is a bylaw that says that it has to be in there, I would say that it'd be safe to remove.
I'll double check that. I don't think there is.
Okay, so we'll bring that up at the executive committee meeting. All right, Dan, you got any items?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I also was going to poll the board, and we could have input from the public as well. But for many years, West Dakota had always met 3 o'clock in the afternoon. At some point in time, it changed to an evening meeting. But my opinion had always been that the afternoon meetings were much more efficient for working with most of the entities with whom we work, which tends to be other agencies such as Game and Fish, School of Mines, city, county, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, with our evening meetings, you know, they come, well, it's oftentimes a difficulty, and we seldom see people from these other agencies unless they're here just specifically to do business with us, you know, if they have to be on the agenda. So, you know, my preference would be to find, you know, look at something like, you know, 3 o'clock, you know, most of the workday is kind of behind most people by then, and typically you can complete meetings, you know, at a reasonable time to, you know, be done by dinner time. So I guess my question would be just, what are the thoughts, you know, are there, I recognize, I mean, people like me who are retired, it really doesn't matter, and it comes pretty easy for me, but that's not necessarily the same for everybody, so.
Well, one thing, you know, we have this building here, and we would have to check with
Right.
the owner to see if this is occupied, you know,
And of course, there are other buildings available, but to me,
Yeah.
first and foremost is, you know, how does it fit
is that,
for directors?
and Linda, when you were talking to him, was there?
We would have to ask if
We
they
would
do
have to
have
we would have
other
to have,
things
yeah,
scheduled
okay.
during the day.
I love that idea.
I would be against it as a working parent, and just 3 o'clock is when school gets out, and it would just, I work at home now permanently with my position, and I work till 5, and I'd rather not be leaving for a meeting, and I find this more convenient. I find it as a way that I can interact more with people than the day. Now, granted, if the board agrees that a 3 o'clock time is better for everyone, I can make the sacrifice and move around, but I would prefer the night meeting personally, but that's just my opinion on the matter.
Well, I'm retired, I can, the time is not a factor for me.
But I also get where you're coming from with the department agencies, because who knows how much they're paying for to show up for these meetings. Well, you're just here for the fun of it.
When the boards of some of the other districts meet?
Well, East Dakota has their meetings, I think, at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Something like that.
9, I don't remember what the time changed, but it was a morning meeting.
Well, I don't know, when I worked for the city, I used to attend these meetings all the time, and they were not in the evening, they were during the day. When we had them over to USGS, yeah, it was not a night meeting. And I think one of the reasons was just what you said, because other agencies, staff would attend those meetings. I was working for the city at the time, and it was definitely more convenient for me.
I really don't have a preference, I could go either way. Majority would prefer.
Well, I think one of the things we need to check is to see if you were suggesting like 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Well, it would be right. It would be something that I think we would ease into. You'd have to, if we were going to consider it, but you know, it's not something I'd look at changing for our March meeting. By
Okay.
It takes some lead time, but I'd be interested in hearing. You know, there's at least 3 people with, you know, in essence, agencies, if you will, mines, Game and Fish, you know, state survey. What are the thoughts, you know?
Joanne Noyes again with the DENR Geological Survey. Personally, it doesn't matter. I live up by Sturgis, so at night it's, you know, a little longer drive, but I stay after work. I get paid one way or the other. Doesn't matter to me. I'm not sure about my co-workers that have to travel from here to come here for meetings and such. That I couldn't answer.
Does somebody else have a comment? Dan?
Just something to keep in mind with the later meetings like now, we can kind of go as long as we want. And it takes me time to tear this stuff down, so.
Yeah.
If you went, say, at 3 and you you have to be maybe more disciplined when you get out of here, depending on what they might have afterwards.
Actually, you'd be down here before 3. It takes half an hour to set up at least. What?
I think there's some more comments from this folks.
Is there some more comments from the public? Oh, Heidi?
So just as a comment for the tear down and setup, because of COVID, the School of Mines now has cameras and microphones in a lot of the classrooms. So if you set up in some of those classrooms where you were before, there's a potential for you to be able just to, sorry, probably can't hear me. There's a potential for you just to be able to hook your laptop up to the existing wired system that's now in the classroom.
But at this time, the School of Mines allowing outside entities? I know that when COVID first ramped up, they said no.
Yeah, I don't know, we can ask. We can ask, but just for the tear down, which I know takes a long time sometimes, for a late meeting, that might be an option as well. Because COVID hopefully will reduce as an issue. That's a new resource.
Well, maybe we could check with,
Oh,
yeah, John, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it's not much. To me, it doesn't matter. I mean, really, the time, morning afternoon or evening.
Okay. I think the key for this place is to see if, they have a lot of meetings in this room, and they've got this time set aside for us right now. So maybe, would you want to check on that?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
I'll call
And then we can visit about it the next meeting.
Yeah, to me, if it's something, it's just something to think about. There's no rush on it. And I guess on my end, I'll probably, talk with a few other folks out there, but I've certainly had many comments from other folks in other agencies that, really say it makes it a lot easier for most of them to, look at attendance on during kind of typical business hours.
Okay. All right, Dan, you got something?
I'll try to make it quick. Just a couple of notes for the new directors. Our policy and bylaws dictate that we use Robert's rules, so in your packet, and Director Fleming, did you get a packet yet? The big one?
No.
Okay.
Not yet.
This is for you. Anyway, there's some Robert's rules. One thing that, there's a couple things that probably get violated a lot, and one of them is when you call the question, you're supposed to be recognized. If you have a point of order, you do not have to be recognized. So if somebody is, if you think the rules are being violated, that would be a point of order. Our meetings are recorded. I put everything on the website within a couple days. There's probably likely going to be some boundary changes because of the 2020 census. DENR, I'm told, is pretty careful about not changing the boundaries, so it might put two directors in the same area, which would be a problem. So I'm just kind of giving a heads up that there may be some changes there. We talked about the hydrology conference. One of my tasks probably this month is the state requires a financial statement. We do not have to do an audit, so that's something I'll be doing. It probably doesn't, maybe I'll work with Director Coe a little bit on that. And I'll be sending out 1099s. I kind of watched that Trinity Eco Park. It looks like it's coming along nicely, since that's right across the street from the office. But finally, the State Department of Ag is thinking about setting up a new riparian buffer program, and some of you directors were on a call with Jay Gilbertson. I was on a call with Bill Smith on what they're doing there. And I'm certainly not an expert on this. There are programs out there already, and there is an existing bill that allows for a tax break regardless of if you're in a program or not. Basically, the idea is to keep cattle away from the water and keep the farming, the agriculture part away from the water to a certain extent, and maybe require 3 inches of grass or something. I'm kind of thinking just off the top of my head here. However, the program doesn't exist yet, so they're just trying to get ideas. So I told Bill I would, I think it's Bill, ask the board if they have any thoughts on any areas around in our water development district that might be applicable to this riparian buffer program, which would reimburse the landowners. I think we heard the number just off the cuff, $90 an acre. Is that it?
I thought it was 70.
70, okay. Anyway, they would get the tax break that already exists, but then in addition to that, they'd get some money if they would maintain this riparian buffer. And I know that this was way before my time, but a lot of studies had been done in the Spring Creek area, so that just comes to mind as a possibility if we're interested in pushing it, because they're not sure how they want to distribute this across the state. They may want to focus on, say, a water development district out east, because maybe I think there's only one water development district that covers a whole watershed, so there's some things they have to consider. And one of the big things they're worried about is what kind of metric they would use to evaluate the efficacy of this program, and what would, what's it called, the integrated report. Is there a impaired waterway requirement that they're going to have to require that the waterway be impaired to implement this program? Anyway, there's a whole bunch of questions, so I'm just throwing it out there, and I can't really speak for the board. You know, I try to get information and give them some feedback as to what I think, but it's really up to the board how you want to pursue this. It probably won't necessarily take a lot of effort from what I hear in terms of personnel, me or any of you guys. And I told them we probably wouldn't contribute financially very much, but of course that's up to the board too. So state riparian buffer program, there's no name for it yet. So maybe Director Bierke, you want to add a little bit to that? Or did I?
I think you pretty much covered it. Yeah. What's the timeline on this? Getting this? Does that have to go through state legislature?
Yeah, it's going to have to be probably go through appropriations, and it's a new program, so I guess I don't really know.
Jay, we talked to Jay Gilbert, and he kind of keeps up on this stuff.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of unknowns when we talked to him, and that meeting that Dan attended was the next day with Bill Smith and other people. So I guess I think we need to have something that we can look at and say, okay, do we want to participate? Something in writing, you know.
Okay. So they're going to have another meeting in another month or so, I think, and I'll just continue to track it.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see if I could sit in on that one.
I think that would make a lot of sense if you could be in on it.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Getting above my pay grade.
I sat in on the first meeting, and I think it has a potential to be a great project, and it certainly, applies to what we do. But yeah, like Jake Gilbertson said, right now there's way more questions than answers. So the state folks need to figure out, you know, what they're looking for from us.
Well, hopefully they'll put a package together that we can hand out here to our board members and we can review it. Yeah,
Was there any participation from NRCS or the Pennington Conservation District on that call, or was it just Water Development
well,
District?
we just, Jay, it was just.
Oh, it was just for Water Development
It was
District.
just us, our board. He was talking to us.
Well, the Bill Smith call had the executive director for the conservation districts, I forgot her name.
Well, this-
Angela Ehlers, probably?
This,
Angela Ehlers?
It could be, because there are only 7 water development districts in the state, but there's 60
Right.
conservation.
Yeah, that'd be Angela.
Okay.
Anyhow, they're represented in some fashion.
Yeah.
Right, the program is certainly more targeted towards, you know, that community
Yeah,
than ours.
There were basically the individual water development districts, and then she was speaking for all the conservation districts.
Scott just handed me I guess this is a proposed House bill regarding repairing buffer strips.
That was to change the 50% to 60%.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's just for
That's
that.
not really this program.
Yeah, this is a different program. Yeah.
But it ties into that.
If you can fix the riparian assessment, as far as the 10-year commitment.
Okay.
That was another thing that was mentioned. They don't want the landowner to have to renew this thing or go through a bunch of work every year. They want to maybe 10, 15 years or something. There's an SRAM program out there too, and I don't really understand the difference between what's out there now and what they're suggesting.
Sounds like we need a little more information here before we could any comment on it. But we're going to have another meeting. We'll learn more. Any items? Are you done, Dan?
I'm done.
Okay. Are there any items from the public? Anybody?
I just have a question. I didn't hear anything about the legislative session, or isn't there that one meeting that you guys go to?
Oh,
That's been canceled, the rural water.
Okay. Never mind.
Their technical conference, which is normally now in January, has been canceled.
anything else? Is there a motion for adjournment? So Scott, second. Ron, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks for coming to the public.
Thank you. Hey, Matt, what are you thinking for meeting?
I don't know. I liked it.
Hey, this guy's having a lot of fun. We're going to.
I liked it.
I told my wife that I would
That's what I thought we were going to
You'll think I was at the bar.
No, I think Monday.